In the age of war, during the era of the samurai, mighty generals and fierce warriors raised their banners across the snow-covered land, each vying for supremacy in a relentless, bloody conflict. Amidst the chaos, however, one man also devoted himself entirely to the battlefield, cutting down his foes with methodical precision. He stood over a grievously wounded soldier, who stared up in terror, screaming that he was a monster and that everyone should run. The warrior looked down, remarking coolly that the man was still alive and must have suffered. As another soldier charged, yelling for him to prepare himself, the warrior's eyes narrowed with grim resolve. For a samurai, there is no retreat. He moved like a whirlwind, his blade a blur of motion. The only reason he continued to fight alongside his comrades was for one thing alone: a battle to the death against the strongest warriors yet to be seen. His relentless assault brought him before a new line of defense, led by a mounted commander. From behind him, an ally's voice rang out, declaring that they had successfully captured the enemy commander. Inspired by the capture, an allied soldier rallied the troops, roaring for them to follow the mercenary and engage the enemy without faltering. The warrior surged forward, leading the charge. He paid them no mind, shouting for the lesser soldiers to get out of his way as he vaulted over a fallen man. His focus was singular, his purpose clear. His target was the enemy general's head. His blade descended upon the general, but the heavily armored man deflected the blow with his massive polearm, the impact sending his horse reeling. Unseated but undeterred, the general scoffed, questioning if a mere mercenary dared to challenge him. The warrior simply noted the successful deflection. Now on even ground, the two warriors faced one another. The general bellowed a challenge, and their weapons met in a shower of sparks. The mercenary gritted his teeth, skillfully parrying the powerful strike. The general's polearm swept down with immense force, but the mercenary stood his ground, catching the blow on his katana with a grunt of exertion. He sees an opening. Realizing the general used his arm as a shield, the mercenary grins with savage intensity, declaring that the general's head is now his. With a powerful, arcing slash, his katana cuts cleanly through the general's neck, severing his head in a single, decisive blow. As his life ends, the general's final thought is one of grim satisfaction. The existence of warriors who could push him to be serious was a welcome reality. Standing over the fallen commander, the mercenary bids a quiet farewell to the unknown warrior, acknowledging it was a good duel. He then turns his attention to approaching soldiers, scoffing at their commander's suggestion that mercenaries are mere errand boys and deciding to take the head as his prize. Before he can act, a sudden volley of arrows descends upon him. He is struck multiple times, the shafts embedding themselves deep in his shoulder, chest, and leg. The commander who had approached him reveals his betrayal. He states that it is nothing personal, but the mercenary must die, as his head is worth more than the enemy generals, a fine tribute for their lord. Despite the arrows piercing his body and blood dripping from his mouth, the warrior looks up with an unbroken spirit. His only response is simple, questioning, "Oh." He then erupts with a ferocious roar, declaring that this very treachery is why he loves being a mercenary. Ignoring his wounds, he charges toward the betrayers as their commander frantically orders another volley. From a distance, another warrior observes the scene, noting that the mercenary had expected to die on the battlefield. As the second wave of arrows closes in, they suddenly shatter in mid-air, stopping just short of their target. The mysterious event stuns everyone. The distant observer, the mercenary himself, and the treacherous commander are all left bewildered. In the ensuing confusion, the commander demands his men find the mercenary, who seems to have vanished. His eyes flutter open. The chaos of the battlefield is gone, replaced by an endless, silent, white void. He finds himself sitting, naked and alone, his body inexplicably whole. Disoriented, he can only wonder what this place is. He rises to his feet, a flicker of surprise on his face as he touches his unblemished chest where the arrows had struck. His confusion quickly turns to urgency as he looks around the empty expanse, demanding to know where his enemies have gone, and more importantly, where he is. A calm voice answers him. He turns to see a woman with long, light-colored hair, her feet bare against the white floor. She explains that she has simply restored his body to its prime. This, she states, is her gift to him, or rather, something more. In a stark, white space, a young woman with long, pale hair clears her throat to begin introductions. She greets the dark-haired warrior, identifying herself as the goddess who oversees the cycle of reincarnation. The man remains silent, his expression unreadable, prompting a flustered outburst from her. She grows indignant at his silence, demanding to know why he is ignoring her mid-greeting. Pointing an accusatory finger, she shouts that she is a goddess and that he should show some respect. He finally speaks, his tone calm and detached. He states that his fate after death was decided long before he was even born, and it was not supposed to conclude in front of a pretty goddess. His unexpected compliment leaves her momentarily speechless. Recovering her composure, she remarks that he catches on quickly. As she speaks, a glowing, book-like tablet materializes in her hand, and she prepares to consult it. She reads from the tablet, recounting the staggering number of people he has killed, tens, hundreds, even thousands. Based on this record, she explains, he would normally be guaranteed a trip to hell. However, she tells him he is lucky, as he was summoned instead. He questions the word summoned. The goddess confirms it with a confident smile, though she adds that she doubts he would understand the full explanation. Floating serenely before the image of a vast, cratered world, she elaborates. There are multiple goddesses, each managing their own world, and she, of course, oversees a beautiful one as well. Her expression turns serious as she explains that a problem has arisen in her world, one that requires a strong warrior to fix. Pointing directly at him, she declares that this is where he comes in, addressing him by the name Rokaru. He turns his back on her, completely dismissive. He states that her world and her problems are of no concern to him, claiming she interrupted his reason for living. Leaning in close, his voice drops to a menacing whisper, telling her that if she were a man, he would have torn her apart and fed her to the bears. He then steps back with a casual wave, stating that he doesn't harm women or children. The goddess collapses in relief, but her mind flashes with a terrifying image of being mauled by bears. The sheer horror of his threat sinks in, and she realizes she was moments from death. She quickly changes her approach, seeing an opening. With a determined grin, she tells him he must be interested in fighting strong opponents. Her world, she explains, is filled with powerful beings he would never encounter in his own. Not just humans, but demonic creatures and beasts that defy all understanding. Clenching her fist, she tempts him with the idea of fighting humans who can split the earth with their swords. His expression shifts from cold indifference to a predatory smirk. The warrior's interest is finally piqued. He asks why she didn't just say that in the first place. He now seems willing to cooperate, asking her to explain the problem she needs him solve. The goddess, looking relieved, assures him that it's nothing complicated. He confirms his understanding of the mission. All he needs to do is kill these monsters. A glint in his eye reveals his satisfaction. This task is perfectly suited to him. He then asks how he is to get to her world. Closing her eyes and clasping her hands in concentration, she tells him she will transfer him there and that he should just sit tight. He offers one final warning, stating that once he goes, there will be no turning back, and he will be unable to help her further. He asks if she still accepts. The goddess appears momentarily hesitant, but dismisses her own worry, telling him there's no need for concern. He declares that he has never expected anyone's help, stating his simple creed: the strong survive, and the weak die. As he speaks these words, his physical form begins to dissolve into swirling streams of light, leaving the goddess to watch his departure. Her relief is replaced by a chilling realization. As the image of his cold, ruthless eyes lingers in her mind, she is struck by a terrible thought. She may have just unleashed a monster into her world. The transfer initiates. In a quiet, sunlit clearing surrounded by ancient trees, an intricate magical sigil glows brightly upon the forest floor, heralding an arrival. As his form begins to coalesce from particles of light, a fleeting vision appears. A vast battlefield blanketed with the bodies of the slain, a testament to the life he left behind. He materializes fully, floating just above the ground in the center of the clearing. Surrounded by lingering motes of divine light, Rokaru has arrived in a new world. He surveys the new landscape, a world with no clothes and no weapon, just as requested. A smile spreads across his face. He likes it. Deciding his first course of action, he resolves to head towards a town. His senses suddenly catch something on the wind. He pauses, detecting the scent of blood and beasts, and realizes someone is being attacked nearby. A look of keen interest crosses his features. Following the scent, he arrives at the scene of a brutal ambush. A man lies wounded and groaning on the ground as a hulking, wolf-like creature stands over him near an overturned carriage. The warrior's eyes widen with amusement. He observes the bipedal beast, noting that the club-wielding dog is wearing more clothes than he is. He bursts into laughter, finding the situation incredibly interesting. His laughter echoes through the clearing, drawing the attention of one of the beastmen. It spots another figure huddled behind the wreckage, calling out that it has found a survivor. From the hiding spot, a desperate voice yells for him to stop laughing and help. He smirks as the beastmen turn their attention to him, their clubs held ready. He cracks his knuckles, calmly assessing the group of what he deems feisty mutts. With that, he lunges. He effortlessly dodges a downward swing and counters with a swift, brutal palm strike that caves in the creature's skull. In a fluid motion, he pivots and grabs another beastman by the face, his attack relentless and overwhelming. The brief battle concludes. He stands over a corpse, remarking with disappointment how weak his opponents were. He then turns to the cloaked survivor, who is now standing, and casually informs them that he will be borrowing their clothes. The survivor pulls back her hood, revealing herself to be the goddess, Lilia. She offers a gentle smile, explaining that she was worried and came to find him, expressing relief that she did. A short time later, Rokaru is dressed in a new set of clothes. He admits they aren't perfect, but will do for now. Lilia, now holding a staff, tells him the attire suits him and asks if he's coming as she heads to town. He readily agrees, pointing out he doesn't know the way, and her compliment seems to catch him slightly off guard. As they walked, Rokaru's expression softened into a contented smile. He found this new world to his liking. anticipating the challenges ahead with a sense of genuine excitement. He voiced this sentiment aloud, telling his companion that he liked her world. She, in turn, asked him to stop calling her goddess, introducing herself as Lilia. She dismissed the title as a hassle, but he countered, insisting that a name is important. Lilia seemed surprised by his firm stance, but ultimately agreed. Their conversation was cut short by a sudden, violent ambush. An arrow whizzed past. In the next instant, the head of an attacking wolf beastman erupted in a spray of gore, its body collapsing lifelessly to the ground. From a tree lean emerged the source of the attack, a far more formidable creature. This massive, white-furred beastman clutched a wounded arm, its eyes burning with fury as it let out a guttural roar, its gaze locking onto the travelers. The creature's sheer size became apparent as it fully revealed itself. It stood hunched, its powerful, muscular frame radiating an aura of pure menace that seemed to darken the very air around it. Its face was a mask of primal horror, with dark, empty sockets for eyes and a gaping maw filled with rows of jagged teeth, promising a brutal and violent end. The air itself is thick with the scent of war. Across the snow-covered land, powerful generals and fierce warriors clash, each sacrificing their lives in the grand struggle to unify the country. It is an era defined by the samurai. Amidst the chaos, however, one man has devoted himself entirely to the battlefield, cutting a swath through his enemies. He stands over a fallen foe who is somehow still breathing, offering a grim apology for the man's suffering. With his last breath, the wounded soldier brands him a monster, screaming for his comrades to run. Heeding the warning too late, two other soldiers charge forward, telling the lone warrior to prepare himself. He is a man apart, a samurai without a master. The masterless samurai meets their charge with fluid grace, his blade a blur against the falling snow. He fights as a mercenary, driven by a singular, stark goal, to find a worthy battle and fight to the death. And then, through the press of bodies, he spots a formidable foe. An enemy general, clad in ornate armor and mounted on a warhorse, commands his troops from the rear. The mercenary's focus narrows, his objective clear: capture the enemy general. He surges forward, roaring a command for his own men to follow. They rally behind him, while the opposing commander shouts for his soldiers not to hesitate and to fight back against the sudden, ferocious assault. The mercenary becomes a whirlwind of motion, leaping over the front lines. He carves a path directly through the lesser soldiers, ignoring them as mere obstacles. His eyes are fixed on a single prize, the general's head. He lands directly before the general's horse, his katana rising just in time to block the downward swing of the commander's heavy polearm. The general stares in disbelief, sneering that a damned mercenary stands no chance against him. The mercenary coolly replies that the block wasn't bad. Enraged, the general swings his weapon again. With a sharp crack, the mercenary parries the blow, shattering the polearm shaft. In the same fluid motion, he closes the distance, the point of his sword coming to rest against the general's throat. He parried the general's heavy downward swing, the impact of steel on steel ringing across the snowy battlefield. The general grunted, questioning if the mercenary was willing to sacrifice an arm for the attack. Seeing his opponent completely exposed, the warrior pressed his advantage without hesitation. In his final moment, the general marveled that men who fought with such deadly seriousness still existed. The thought was cut short as the mercenary's katana sliced cleanly through his helmet, felling him in a single, decisive blow. Standing over the fallen general, the blood-spattered warrior heard a new voice. A commander from the opposing army acknowledged it was a good fight, but then declared his intention to take the mercenary's head. Wearily, the warrior questioned if they viewed mercenaries as simple servants before grimly accepting the challenge. But before he could even raise his sword, a sudden volley of arrows pierced his body from behind, staggering him. The commander revealed his treachery, explaining that the mercenary's head was now more valuable than the general's. He mused that taking both heads would be a worthy souvenir for their lord. With a cold apology, he condemned the warrior to death, bidding the mighty but nameless fighter farewell as he bled out in the snow. Amidst the chaos of battle, an enemy commander orders his archers to fire. The mercenary Rokaru, bloodied but undeterred, charges forward with a fierce grin, declaring that this very thrill is why he can never quit his line of work. He sprints across the snowy ground, a solitary figure against the storm of battle. For samurai, life and conflict are inextricably linked. He seems to accept his fate, certain that his end will come on the battlefield. An arrow slices through the air, aimed directly for him. The warrior's charge is cut short as a glowing, intricate circle of light erupts from the ground beneath him. The observing warrior with the scarred eye watches in disbelief as Rokaru is suddenly lifted and vanishes, leaving the enemy soldier stunned. In the aftermath, the enemy soldiers shout in confusion, demanding to know what happened. The arrow meant for Rokaru is now embedded in a tree where he once stood. An order is given to find him. His consciousness fades into a silent, dark transition. He slowly awakens, his eyes fluttering open. He finds himself sitting in a vast, empty white space, his body now completely unclad and clean. He gets to his feet, his mind racing. His first thought is of the enemy, but then he looks around at the endless void and questions where he is. His confusion turns to shock as he examines his own body. He realizes with a start that his body has become younger and frantically wonders what on earth is happening to him. He stood in the stark white emptiness, his body now youthful and whole. Before him, the ethereal woman explained that she had restored his body to its prime, offering it as a gift. Taking a step forward, she prepared to introduce herself. With a pleasant smile, she introduced herself as the goddess who controls the wheel of reincarnation. The warrior, however, remained silent, his expression unchanging. His continued silence visibly annoyed her, as she questioned if he was ignoring her. Her frustration grew as she demanded respect, reminding him of her divine status. In response to her outburst, he simply gave a non-committal thumbs up. Breaking his silence at last, he asked plainly if he was dead. He asserted that if that were the case, there must have been a mistake. He elaborated, explaining that his fate, to die before Yama himself, was sealed long before his birth, not to be decided by a beautiful goddess. The unexpected compliment caused a faint blush to appear on her cheeks. Finding his response unexpectedly sharp, she summoned a glowing ledger into her hands, remarking on his quickness as she prepared to look him up. As she scanned the pages, she began to tally his kills, the number climbing rapidly into the thousands. She declared that such a record guaranteed him a place in hell, noting that he was fortunate she had summoned him instead. The word summoned caught his attention, and he questioned it. The goddess, momentarily surprised, claimed the details were beyond his comprehension, simply confirming it with a yes as a small flame flickered to life in her palm. The goddess explains the structure of the cosmos, revealing that there are many goddesses, each responsible for managing their own world. She declares that she, too, has a world of her own, one she describes as truly beautiful. She continues, stating that a problem has arisen in her world, prompting her to search for talented individuals who could resolve it. With a playful wink and a pointed finger, she identifies Rokaru as the one she found for this task. His response is immediate and blunt. He refuses. The goddess begins to protest that she hasn't even explained the situation, but he cuts her off, stating simply that he understands enough. He elaborates, turning his back on her. He declares that he doesn't care about her world or her selfish request, accusing her of having ruined his reason for living. Leaning in close, he snarls that if she were a man, he would have torn her to pieces and fed her to a bear. The threat sends her reeling. She collapses, horrified at the cruel image of being fed to a bear. Rokaru, however, casually dismisses her fear with a wave of his hand, stating that he doesn't harm women or children. Her shock quickly gives way to a sharp, knowing grin. A realization dawns on her, and she leans forward intently, asking if he is interested in fighting the strong ones. From a distance, Rokaru seems wary, telling her to wait. He clarifies his position, explaining that his former world was filled with all kinds of beings, from powerful warriors to creatures one would never encounter in a peaceful realm like hers. The goddess latches onto his words, her expression now radiant with excitement. She declares that her world is home to monsters and beasts beyond human understanding, creatures with magical powers. She poses a question to him. As a man who can cleave the earth with a sword, wouldn't he relish the chance to fight them? His demeanor changes instantly. A slow, predatory smirk spreads across his face, his interest finally peaked. He asks her why she didn't lead with that information. Now fully invested, he asks what problem she needs him to solve. The goddess explains that it's nothing too difficult. Monsters are multiplying at an abnormal rate in her world. With a serious expression, she formally requests that he put a stop to it. She closed her eyes, hands clasped in concentration, and explained that she would teleport him there. He simply needed to sit tight. With a confident smirk, Rokaru eagerly asked how he was to get to this new world. He declared that killing monsters was his specialty. The goddess, observing him from short distance, seemed to question his certainty, asking if he was truly sure about his decision, even though he had already agreed. She then warned him with grave seriousness. Once he arrived, there would be no second chances, and she would be powerless to help him. With these stakes established, she asked him one last time if he was still willing to take on the task. He responded without a hint of hesitation, stating that he had never expected help from anyone. To him, that was simply the way of things. As he spoke, the goddess stood amidst a rising vortex of energy, the teleportation process beginning. His gaze remained fixed and resolute as he articulated his core belief, the principle that had guided his entire life. The strong live and the weak die. In a realm of white emptiness, Lilia clasps her hands, her expression a mixture of hope and resolve. She expresses her conviction that Rokaru is the most suitable person for the task ahead, reassuring herself that he will be fine. Despite her words, a flicker of doubt crosses her mind. She recalls the warrior's bone-chilling, cold eyes and is struck by a disquieting thought. Perhaps she has just unleashed a monster. Far away, in a sun-dappled forest clearing, the intricate magical sigil that facilitated his passage glows with fading energy before vanishing completely. The last vestiges of the summoning magic dissipate from a restored hand as a pillar of light erupts from the vast woodland, marking the point of arrival. In that same clearing, Rokaru now stands, his body completely healed and unblemished. His armor is gone, replaced by a simple white cloth tied around his waist, and his long black hair flows freely. A wide, eager grin spreads across his face as he takes his first breath in this new place. With a sharp laugh, he realizes this must be the goddess's world. He surveys the lush landscape, noting that it's quite a nice place. Acknowledging his lack of clothes and gear, he decides his first priority is to find town. His thoughts are interrupted as a scent drifts on the wind. His expression sharpens as he identifies the smell of blood and animals, immediately wondering who is under attack. With a surge of anticipation, he declares it's time to investigate. He breaks into a sprint, eager to see what kind of monsters inhabit this world. He bursts into a clearing to find a scene of carnage. A hulking, wolf-like beast man stands over a fallen person, laughing maniacally, while another attacks a second victim near a cart. Rokaru stops short, his hair whipping around him as he takes in the sudden violence. He observes the scene with a wide, unnerving grin. Two wolf-like beast men stand over a fallen traveler, clubs in hand. He notes aloud that they are bipedal dogs, remarking with amusement that they are better dressed than he is and that the sight is quite a spectacle. His attention is drawn by a desperate cry for help from a nearby, covered wagon. A hooded figure pleads not to be left to die. Rokaru turns, calmly wondering if he's found a survivor. Alerted by his presence, the two beastmen turn towards him, their faces contorted into vicious snarls as they bare their sharp teeth. In response, he settles into a low, ready stance, his hands poised for combat. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he compliments their quick reaction time. The beastmen advance, one raising its club to strike. With blinding speed, he evades the attack, seizes the beastman's arm, and hurls it aside. Without pausing, he scoops a rock from the ground, leaps into the air, and smashes it into the skull of the second creature, felling it with a single, brutal blow. Standing over the corpse, he expresses his disappointment, finding the creature too weak and slow. He then turns his attention to the hooded figure, calmly informing them that he'll be taking the fallen beastman's club. As he sits among the carnage, the hooded figure approaches. He greets her, stating that her appearance is just as he expected. The figure seems taken aback by his casual demeanor. The figure lowers her hood, revealing herself to be Lilia. She looks at him with wide, earnest eyes, confessing that she was worried and came looking for him. She expresses her relief that he found her instead. Sometime later, now dressed in simple traveler's clothes and a fur mantle, Rokaru announces his intention to go to town. Lilia, now holding a staff, asks if she is to accompany him. He confirms, asking rhetorically if she even knows the way. He gives her an appraising look, commenting that she looks good, which seems to fluster her. He breaks into a wide, eager smile. He declares that he quite likes her world, and he thinks it's going to be fun. As he walks with the woman he knows as a goddess, she formally introduces herself, stating that her name in this world is Lilia. She insists that he not make the mistake of calling her goddess again. He complains, asking if he can't just call her whatever he wants, but she gives a firm no, you can't. He seems to relent with a simple yeah. Their journey is abruptly halted. From the remains of the defeated wolf beastmen, a much larger, white-furred creature rises. Its head is partially blown apart, yet it stands defiantly, its clawed hands raised. The monster's grievous head, wound violently, knits itself back together. As flesh and fur reform in an instant, a dark, swirling sphere of energy manifests in the center of its muscular chest. Its regeneration complete, the hulking, white-furred beast hunches over, a low growl rumbling from its chest. A palpable aura of power emanates from its new form. It lifts its head, revealing a horrifying visage. Its eyes are dark, empty pits, and its mouth is a grotesque snarl of jagged teeth, the dark sphere of energy now glowing ominously near its jaw. A woman calls out the name Rokuro to a samurai who has devoted himself to the battlefield as a mercenary. Her staff begins to hum with a strange energy, causing her to grimace. He had been reincarnated into another world, summoned by a goddess to fight against monsters whose power was steadily growing. This new path had led him to the royal capital, a sprawling city where people, goods, and ambitions intersected behind formidable walls. As they reached the outer wall, Rokuro marveled at the high stone construction, remarking that it wouldn't be easily penetrated. The woman with him, Lilia, quickly shushed him, telling him not to say such things just as they were about to enter. She then noticed two figures ahead, pointing them out to Rokuro. Their approach was met by the heavy, rhythmic clang of armored boots upon the stone path. Before them, two imposing guards in full-plate armor stood sentinel, blocking the way to the massive city gates. One of the guards immediately confronted Lilia, questioning why she was pointing a weapon at a beautiful woman. Lilia, confused, realized the guard was speaking to her and expressed disbelief that she, along with Rokuro, was considered suspicious enough to be taken to the guard station. Before the situation could escalate, a calm voice interjected, asking them not to make a fuss. The speaker explained that their duty was to maintain the capital's safety and that they only wished to ask a few questions. The man who spoke stepped forward, his expression a mixture of charm and suspicion. He was Leon Cartwright, captain of the Royal Capital Garrison. He looked them over and asked pointedly if they were hiding something. The captain stood between his guard and the two travelers, creating a tense standoff at the very entrance to the city they had journeyed so far to reach. The captain, with a confident smile, agrees to the questioning. He gestures for them to follow him. Rokaru, impatient to see the capital, states he'll answer anything, but it must be quick. He leads Rokaru into a Spartan checkpoint office, apologizing for its dusty state. Unconcerned with the surroundings, Rokaru asks for Lilia's whereabouts. The captain explains that since her identity has been verified, she is waiting outside. The captain's inquiry then turns to Lilia. He points out that while she appears to be a guild-registered apprentice adventurer, she is not part of the local guild. Rokaru deflects, stating he doesn't know her situation as they only recently met and he himself is from a distant land. Unsatisfied with the vague answer, the captain presses for the name of this faraway place. Rokaru reveals he is from Hinamoto. The captain admits he's never heard of it, and Rokaru explains that this is unsurprising, as it is a remote and isolationist country. The captain then shifts his focus, asking for the warrior's name and his purpose in the royal capital. He introduces himself simply as Rokaru, explaining that he intends to become an adventurer and needs to acquire equipment for killing monsters. He observes that mercenary work is uncommon in such peaceful lands and correctly deduces that this was Rokaru's profession back in Hinamoto. Rokaru affirms this, remarking that it's a reliable trade in a nation perpetually at war. He then clarifies his true motivation, revealing that money is merely a secondary concern. His true quarry, he states, are strong ones. The intensity of this declaration captures the captain's full attention. After a moment of consideration, the captain remarks that Rokaru is quite an understanding man. He agrees to grant him a temporary tourist ID, but notes there will be conditions, which he begins to write down for Rokaru to read carefully. He hands the completed document to Rokaru, who accepts it with an expression of understanding. The captain instructs him to visit the Adventurers Guild before the temporary ID expires and to avoid causing any problems. As Rokaru prepares to leave, Leon stops him, stating there is one more thing. The captain then presents a checkered cloth, his expression turning into a sharp, knowing smile. He delivers a final, pointed warning. He detests pointless killing. Having passed the checkpoint, Rokaru takes his first steps into the city proper, a faint smile on his face as he is welcomed to the royal capital. He is immediately greeted by an exuberant Lilia, who expresses her relief that he was allowed through. She admits she was worried he might cause trouble, prompting him to question if she sees him as a mad dog. Lilia retorts that he is, in fact, a battle maniac. Their exchange is interrupted by a well-dressed older man who introduces himself as Keith, the manager of the Adventurers Guild. He explains that he was the one who vouched for Rokaru at the garrison. After Rokaru confirms his identity, Keith acknowledges the late hour and invites them to visit the guild at a later date, also thanking Rokaru for taking care of Lyra. As the pair walk away, Keith turns to find Captain Leon Cartwright standing nearby. The captain lets out a weary sigh, remarking on what a character Rokaru is, which prompts Keith to note his dejected tone. Leon explains that the swordsman acted provocatively, as if he were being tested. Keith, however, offers a different perspective, stating that he sincerely doubts any malicious intent. To him, Rokaru simply seemed like a gentleman who is only interested in facing the strong. Meanwhile, as Rokaru and Lilia continue on their way, Leon's final assessment echoes. The man is a bloodthirsty beast, someone who must be watched carefully. The warrior pays no mind to such judgments, his attention focused instead on the checkered cloth Leon had given him, which he now wraps securely around his armored fist. With that taken care of, Lilia suggests they find an inn for the night. Rokaru agrees, and his gaze falls upon a nearby shop, which they decide to enter. Inside, his eyes immediately fix upon a kimono on display. He asks the shopkeeper if it is for sale, his question surprising Lilia. The shopkeeper explains that it's a worn-out piece from the eastern provinces, a rare item she couldn't bring herself to discard. Ignoring Lilia's reminder that he has no money, Rokaru declares with a grin that he'll take it, asking for the price and wondering aloud if credit exists in this new land. A kindly shopkeeper offers a piece of clothing to the warrior, insisting he take it free of charge. She explains it's better for him to wear it than for her to throw it away, adding that it would look good on him. He and the goddess look on with grateful surprise. He dons the gifted garment, a patterned haori, and stands with a newfound air of confidence. The goddess watches him, a faint blush on her cheeks, thinking to herself how picturesque the scene is. As they continue on their way, he remarks that he never thought he'd find something for his waist here. Confused by his cryptic comment, she asks him to clarify what he means. He explains that he's talking about a katana, prompting her to immediately remind him that he doesn't have any money. With a weary smile, she thinks to herself that he's just like a child. Despite this, they enter a large weapons emporium. The warrior observes the impressive selection, even though he knows he cannot purchase anything. They approach a clerk, who politely welcomes them and asks what they are looking for. The warrior asks if they have any katanas, but the clerk seems unfamiliar with the word. Nearby, a wealthy-looking customer scoffs in disgust, muttering the word plebs. Ignoring the insult, he picks up a broadsword from a display. He notes how light it is, almost like a toy, and wonders about the intricate pattern engraved near the hilt. His companion explains that the engraving is a magic crest. She elaborates that such weapons can channel magical power, enhancing their strength or allowing them to damage formless monsters, thus broadening their tactical use. The warrior is taken aback, unfamiliar with the concept of magic. While he tries to comprehend this, a young girl complains to the arrogant customer, asking him to get rid of the moneyless pair. Prompted, the clerk approaches and politely informs them that they don't carry what the warrior is looking for. The goddess smiles apologetically and begins to lead the warrior away. Just as he is being ushered out, his eyes widen in sudden, sharp recognition. His attention was captured by a familiar voice. Inside a different establishment, Lilia called out his name in surprise, holding up a large piece of dark fabric. Rokaru stood nearby, arms crossed, observing the interior of the weapon shop. He picked up a long sword from a nearby barrel, testing its weight and balance. The shop clerk, accompanied by a young girl, instructed him to prepare for a test cut. The clerk wheeled out a large, ornate piece of chest armor mounted on a stand. As he did, he muttered a disdainful comment about the sword's quality. When Rokaru questioned him, the clerk quickly dismissed it as nothing and hurried to set up the armor. He presented the target, explaining it was a standard piece of general armor used for testing weapons. Rokaru glanced back at Lilia, apologizing for the delay, but she encouraged him to take his time and test the blade thoroughly. The clerk watched with a smug grin, confident in his deception. He knew the armor was actually their top-grade model, and he anticipated the cheap sword failing to even scratch it, hoping to humiliate the warrior. In response, Rokaru settled into a low stance, his blade held ready. His eyes narrowed, his focus absolute as he prepared to strike. The clerk and the young girl looked on, awaiting his failure. In a single, fluid motion, he swung the sword. The heavy plate armor fell apart, cleaved cleanly in two, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Lilia stared in astonishment as Rokaru stood calmly amidst the result, a faint smile on his lips. He examined the sword's crossguard, where a small, almost imperceptible symbol was etched. A quiet realization came over him as he confirmed his suspicion. "I found it," he murmured. The clerk, still processing what happened, burst into condescending laughter, advising the dear customer to reconsider his budget since such a cheap sword was useless. Rokaru, however, simply turned to leave, stating he had no intention of ever returning. As he and Lilia walked out, the stunned clerk was left holding the hilt of the sword, its blade having shattered from the force of the cut. The girl commented dismissively on the behavior of plebs. The clerk, now holding a piece of the sundered armor, agreed, labeling Rokaru a sore loser and declaring that they were the ones who didn't want him as a customer. He and the arrogant girl were left standing beside the sundered armor. While the clerk remained frozen in disbelief, the girl calmly announced that she would take care of the matter. Their composure was a front. Both were utterly stunned, wondering how it was possible to split armor in half like that. They could only question what kind of man he was. Meanwhile, the subject of their shock, Rokaru, walked calmly down the street with Lilia. She asked where they were going, suggesting they rest an inn, but he simply replied, "Not yet." He clarified that since she wanted him to kill monsters, he would first need a weapon. Lilia acknowledged his point, but expressed doubt, questioning if they could conveniently find a suitable one, just as they had found his kimono. His response was simple and decisive. If they could not find a weapon, they would make one. The suggestion seemed to startle her. As she considered it, Rokaru's attention was drawn to plumes of smoke rising from chimneys in the distance. Seeing where he was looking, Lilia appeared to understand his intention. His gaze was fixed on an archway that led to a district filled with the sounds of industry. Lilia recognized it immediately, exclaiming that it was the blacksmith's quarter. Now within the district, they stood before a workshop. Rokaru remarked that weapons often have a maker's name engraved on them, and asked if she could identify who forged them. After a moment of her apparent confusion, he smiled and pointed, having found exactly what he was looking for. Inside a rustic forge, a young woman with her hair in pigtails and a smithing visor pushed up on her forehead looks up from her work. As Rokaru and Lilia enter, she greets them with a hint of weariness, asking if they are back already and beginning to state that if it's about money, she has none to give. She is cut short as Lilia explains to a stunned Rokaru that their host is not a child, but a dwarf. Lilia elaborates that while dwarves may be small, they are a race with dexterous hands, second to none when it comes to craftsmanship. Rokaru's expression is one of pure shock at the revelation. Continuing the introductions while Rokaru remains flustered, Lilia addresses the dwarf politely. She introduces herself as Lilia and her companion as Rokaru, stating that they have come to commission a weapon and asking if she can do that for them. The blacksmith lifts her visor completely, a warm, welcoming smile spreading across her face as she introduces herself as Pinya. Her expression then shifts to one of quiet melancholy as she realizes it has been a long time since she last had a customer. After inspecting one of her blades, Rokaru expresses his admiration for Pinya's work, noting its flawless forging, shape, and balance. He then unrolls a design, asking if she can create a single-edged sword with a curved blade for him. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a violent banging on the workshop's main door. As Lilia turns in alarm, the wooden door splinters and bursts open, forced inward by several unwelcome visitors. 3 rough-looking men barge in. The apparent leader, a muscular man with spiky hair, contemptuously shoves Lilia aside, telling her to move as he announces they are forcing their way inside. He immediately confronts Pinya, demanding to know when she will pay back her father's debt. Pinya retorts that she has already paid what was owed and refuses to pay any illegal interest. Enraged by her defiance, the man reaches for her, his voice dripping with menace. In a flash, the thug is sent sprawling to the floor. Rokaru now stands between him and Pinya, calmly remarking on their ill-mannered interruption and asking if they failed to notice he was speaking with the blacksmith. The thug leader glares up from the ground, demanding to know what just happened. Rokaru has a fleeting thought that he was supposed to stay out of trouble, but Lilia steps forward, declaring firmly that their actions are in self-defense. The three men prepare to retaliate. She points with divine authority, declaring it is time for judgment. Lilia commands that the men be beaten half to death, assuring that the goddess will forgive the act. The two thugs are taken aback, one remarking that she is asking for the impossible. In response, the thug leader swings a heavy club directly at Rokaru's head while his companion shouts a tactical suggestion to aim for the throat. Unfazed, Rokaru raises a single hand, intercepting the weapon's path with a dull thud. He moves with impossible speed, ducking under the swing and launching himself into the air. His target is not the man who attacked him, but the striped shirt thug, whom he targets with a precise finger strike aimed at the glabella, the point between the eyes. The precise blow lands, sending the striped shirt thug stumbling backward in a daze. In the same fluid motion, the third thug is knocked unconscious, collapsing to the stone floor with a heavy thud. On the ground, the dazed thug clutches his head, glaring up at his assailant and cursing him. Rokaru stands over him, his expression calm and analytical. His rage overcoming the pain, he scrambles up, drawing a knife and charging forward. Rokaru remains perfectly still, awaiting the attack. As the man charges, Rokaru calmly explains that there are 3 vital points on the human body. Hitting them with enough force causes death, but a light attack will simply immobilize. He identifies the solar plexus as his target and strikes the charging thug with pinpoint accuracy, his knuckles connecting with the man's torso. With his opponent neutralized, he adds a chilling clarification. He is a samurai capable of capturing an enemy general without killing him, but he is, of course, also an expert at killing. With all 3 men subdued, he turns to Lilia and asks what should be done with them, suggesting they could be hanged. Lilia, however, steps forward and simply says, "Heal." A gentle light envelopes the workshop as she explains this will serve as an example. After her healing light fades, Pinya steps forward, looking down at the now conscious thugs. She warns them that if they ever threaten her again, they won't be leaving with just bruises. The 2 men look up at her, their faces etched with pure terror. She shouted a final warning after the fleeing thugs, ensuring they spread the word to their associates. Her outburst faded into quiet reflection. She mused that no matter where one goes, people like that are bound to exist. Rokaru, standing with Lilia, remarked that the situation was handled, and Pinya expressed her hope that the men had learned their lesson. She then tightened her grip on her hammer, admitting she had never seen them run away before. Rokaru, looking at her with Lilia, offered a simple, sincere thank you. Her gratitude and renewed confidence shone through as she made a solemn vow. On her pride as Pinya the blacksmith, she promised to forge the best single-edged, curved sword they had ever seen. Her passionate declaration was met with warm, appreciative smiles from both Rokaru and Lilia. Meanwhile, the thugs burst through a doorway elsewhere, cursing their failure. They had clearly underestimated their opponents. They stumbled before their seated boss, who demanded to know if they had secured the money. The leader stammered, explaining that they were interrupted by a strange duo. He listened with cold disdain. Identified as Bruno Jordani, the boss of the Jordani family, he cut off their excuses, calling them a disgrace. With a chilling resolve, he declared that he would handle the matter himself. In a sunlit courtyard, Lilia collapses to her knees, breathing heavily from exertion. She grits her teeth, determined that she cannot allow herself to rest. In the background, Rokaru continues his own training, striking a wooden post with his sword, while Pinya sits nearby, engrossed in a book. Rokaru approaches her with a confident smirk, casually resting his sword on his shoulder. He teases Lilia, asking if she's already exhausted from a little training and telling her not to be so sluggish. She retorts that anyone would be tired after swinging a staff for 2 hours straight. Changing the subject, Rokaru turns his attention to Pinya, asking who the men from the previous day were. Without looking up from her book, Pinya dismisses them as just a bunch of thugs who call themselves the Jordani family. Her hand rests calmly on the hilt of a weapon at her side. She then presents a piece of paper to Rokaru, explaining that she needs him to gather the materials listed on it to forge his new katana. She insists he gather a large quantity of them. To acquire these materials, their path leads them to a large, prominent building in the center of town, distinguished by a massive, curved horn mounted over its main entrance. Inside, a cheerful receptionist with long rabbit-like ears, named Giselle, greets them warmly. Rokaru and Lilia observe the bustling hall, filled with other adventurers. Rokaru correctly surmises that this lively place is the Adventurers Guild. Lilia approaches the desk and politely asks Giselle if she could register Rokaru as an adventurer. The receptionist responds with an enthusiastic, certainly, as one of her ears twitches slightly. As Giselle begins filling out the registration form with a quill, Rokaru voices his excitement. He realizes that with this registration, they can finally enter dungeons, which he imagines to be dens of monsters. His enthusiasm is abruptly halted. Giselle looks up from her work with a serious expression and asks if the two of them are already part of a party. When Lilia confirms they are not, the receptionist apologetically informs them that the guild cannot allow newly registered adventurers to go on a dungeon attack. The news leaves both Lilia and Rokaru stunned and speechless. Rokaru's expression soured. How troublesome, he muttered, before asking the receptionist how he could gain entry to the dungeons. The woman, Giselle, cheerfully explained the guild's ranking system. To enter dungeons alone, he would first need to pass a promotion test to advance from wood to iron rank. Lilia, sensing his impatience, wondered aloud how many years such a test might take. Seeing his dilemma, she turned to him with a smile and offered a solution. If he didn't mind, she could introduce him to a party. Overhearing their exchange, Giselle's face lit up. With great enthusiasm, she announced that she knew an iron rank party that was currently recruiting new members and insisted they leave everything to her. Following her directions, they soon found themselves walking along a path outside the city. Lilia stopped, a grim realization dawning on her. The receptionist hadn't found a party for them. She had recruited them for a party. As they continued, Lilia fumed, convinced the receptionist was merely jealous of her beauty and had tricked them into being porters. Walking ahead, Rokaru chuckled, remarking that she was quite the complainer for a goddess. He glanced back over his shoulder, his teasing smile softening. "I'm sorry you, too," he said, offering a quiet apology for the situation. Moments later, they met the party. A friendly young man with spiky dark hair introduced himself as Joe, the leader, and thanked them for coming on short notice. He was flanked by his companions, a long-haired man named Lem and a cheerful woman with short hair named Mika. Joe led the way toward a rocky cliff face, announcing they were near the entrance. Lilia, now in better spirits, told him they were their lifesavers. They had arrived at the forest dungeon, located on the outskirts of the royal capital. As they stood before the dark, gaping entrance, Joe correctly surmised that this was their first time in a dungeon. He mentioned that his own party had explored dozens of them. He turned to them with a confident grin and a thumbs up, declaring that this was a perfect opportunity for them to learn a great deal from his experienced team. As the newly formed group prepared to depart, Lilia offered her thanks to the adventurers. Feeling the weight of the journey ahead, she then hesitantly asked if they could take a short break before entering. Her request was interrupted by the arrival of another party, who looked down on them with disdain. One of the newcomers mocked them as iron-ranked weaklings, telling them to go back to the countryside as dungeons were not playgrounds. Another looked directly at Rokaru and Lilia, contemptuously asking if they were mere porters, while a third called them parasites for associating with such low-level adventurers. As a condescending group turned their backs and walked away, Joe's party fumed. He muttered that they were bastards, resentful that they had only recently been promoted to bronze rank. Mika angrily agreed, calling them a bunch of jerks. His frustration hardened into resolve. Joe declared that he couldn't take it anymore, and that their party would do their best, vowing they would show everyone who was truly in charge. Lilia, however, was personally offended by the insults. Fuming, she declared how rude it was to be called parasites, and urged Rokaru to go fight them. He calmly observed that their original goal seemed to have changed. Putting the confrontation behind them, the party finally reached their destination. The dungeon, a den of countless monsters that has existed in this world since ancient times, is a place of great mystery, with some believing it to be connected to another dimension. Deep within it lies a core that continuously generates monsters, and because of this, numerous valuable items that do not exist elsewhere in the world are frequently discovered within its halls. For this reason, adventurers dive deeper and deeper into its spiraling abyss, each with their own goals and motivations, whether it be for adventure, fame, or treasure. Rokaru concluded his explanation of what a dungeon is. Uninterested in the lecture, Joe laughed and urged everyone to forget about it and start treasure hunting, eagerly asking where the monsters were. His question was answered almost immediately. Rokaru's eyes widened as he spotted movement ahead, shouting a warning to the others that monsters were there. Just as the newly formed parties prepared for their first battle, the arrogant bronze-ranked adventurers arrived on the scene. Seeing the monsters, one of them spoke with disdainful confidence, remarking on the timing. He declared that they would provide a good example of how to properly handle such a situation, positioning themselves between the monsters and the newer adventurers. Down a stone corridor, two goblin sentries stand guard. One, armed with a crude axe and a wooden plank for a shield, stands beside another wielding a curved blade and a pot lid. Observing them, the adventurer Joe warns his party that it will be bad if the goblins call for allies and asks Mika to act. She readily agrees, initiating a spell of inhibition magic. Closing her eyes in concentration, she casts silence as a sphere of energy gathers in her hand. The spell takes effect instantly. A shimmering field envelopes the two goblins, who flinch in surprise, their mouths clamped shut, unable to utter a sound. With their enemies muted, Joe shouts for Lem to follow as the party charges forward. He closes the distance in an instant, his sword a blur as he deflects the first goblin's weapon and sends its shield flying before raising his blade for a final strike. As he focuses on his target, the second goblin lunges at his exposed back, axe raised high. From the side, Lim takes aim with his bow, declaring that the attack will not land on his watch. He looses an arrow, which flies true and strikes the axe-wielding goblin squarely in the side, interrupting its attack and sending it stumbling away from Joe. Safe from a blow, Joe pivots and cuts down the staggered creature. With the immediate threat eliminated, he grins and rallies his companions to keep moving forward. The battle intensifies as new threats emerge. Joe shouts a warning as a swarm of horned rabbits charges them. From a higher vantage point, Lim announces he will flank them. At the same time, Mika spots large bats descending and prepares another inhibition spell, Ultrasound, intending to drop them from sky. Elsewhere, Rokaru and Lilia observe the unfolding chaos. Both watch with pleased smiles, clearly impressed by the adventurer's coordinated efforts. He remarks that understanding the ecology and behavior of monsters is a logical strategy for devising countermeasures. He finds their methods, especially their use of magic, quite interesting. As he watched, the adventuring party concluded their battle. Their leader, Joe, raised his sword in triumph over the fallen monsters, shouting for his companions to begin stripping the materials from the corpses. Joe then turned his attention to Rokaru, who stood with another warrior near the dungeon entrance. He explained that they were in a beginner to intermediate dungeon where the upper floors were filled with weak monsters. Seeing it as a good opportunity, he asked Rokaru if he'd like to try fighting. In response, Rokaru knelt down, his focus seemingly on the ground before him. Surprised by the gesture, Joe asked if he was sure. Rokaru simply affirmed that he was. He rose to his feet, drawing his katana and declaring he would make it look easy his own way. Nearby, Mika expressed her concern for his safety, but Lim confidently reassured her that Rokaru would be fine. The warrior then carefully wiped his blade clean. With his weapon ready, he strode toward a small group of goblins who were milling about. They turned, their expressions shifting from idle indifference to confusion as they registered his purposeful approach. From their vantage point, Joe remarked on Rokaru's brazen confidence. Mika, however, pointed out a potential flaw in his solo approach, worrying that it would be dangerous if the goblins called for allies, especially since he couldn't use magic. As if on cue, the goblins reacted to the intrusion. One let out a startled cry, and the others brandished their crude weapons, a small axe, a sickle, and a large wooden paddle, preparing to swarm the lone warrior. In response to their aggression, he took a single, deliberate step forward. Then, he vanished into a blur of motion. In a single, fluid strike, he carved a path directly through the goblin ranks, his blade moving faster than the eye could follow. The creatures were cut down instantly, their bodies and weapons sent flying. The three adventurers could only stare, their faces a mask of utter shock, confusion, and disbelief at the overwhelming display of speed and power they had just witnessed. He stood unfazed amidst the carnage he had wrought, his katana held at the ready as he surveyed the fallen goblins. His attack had been a single, seamless motion, a whirlwind of steel that cleaved through multiple foes before they could even raise their weapons in defense. Just as the last goblin fell, a new threat emerged from the dungeon shadows, a swarm of large, screeching bats descending upon him. Instead of raising his sword, he calmly bent down and picked up a small stone from the ground as more monsters, a pack of horned rabbits, joined the fray. He remained perfectly still, a picture of calm, as the horned rabbits charged forward in a wave of white fur and sharp points. With a precise flick of his wrist, he sent the small stone skipping across the dungeon floor, kicking up a tiny burst of dust upon impact. The stone then ricocheted with impossible speed and accuracy, striking down the charging rabbits and the diving bats in a single, devastating chain reaction. Watching from a distance, the other adventurers were speechless. Joe stared in disbelief, wondering what kind of movements he had just seen, while Lim questioned how he could possibly be a mere apprentice. As they tried to process the impossible feat, Lilia appeared nearby, a knowing smile on her face. She remarked that he had met her expectations yet again. Within the dungeon, Rokaru stands with a calm, almost detached expression, facing a massive, humanoid creature constructed from cracked, interlocking stones. The creature's sudden appearance sends a tremor through the area, startling Joe and his party who were exploring nearby. Their faces register shock and confusion at the unexpected disturbance. Back at the confrontation, the stone behemoth charges forward, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Rokaru reacts instantly, leaping backward with fluid grace to create distance from the attack. As the dust settles, the adventurers get a clear view of the monster, identifying it with a shared sense of dread. Is an iron golem. The party quickly assesses the threat. Mika questions why a monster from the middle floors is here, while Joe insists they need to be at least bronze rank to fight it. He shouts a warning to Rokaru, urging him to retreat immediately. He ignores the plea entirely. Instead, Rokaru launches himself forward, sword in hand, directly towards the golem. Mika cries out his name, her voice filled with alarm. She shouts a frantic warning that physical attacks are almost ineffective against iron golems. As he uses a nearby pillar to vault into the air, Rokaru smirks, having noted the keyword. Almost ineffective is not the same as completely ineffective. With that realization, his blade becomes a silver blur, striking the golem's joints with rapid precision. He lands lightly on a shattered rock, ready for his next move, as his companion's fear turns to exhilarated support, cheering for him to show the monster his strength. He continues the assault, ducking under a clumsy swing to deliver a powerful, arcing slash that cracks the golem's stony leg. The adventurers watch, their faces a mixture of disbelief and utter awe at his overwhelming skill. Sometime later, the battle won. The party proceeds through a torchlit corridor. They are laden with spoils from their victory, and Joe beams with satisfaction, exclaiming over their huge haul. He celebrates their good fortune, declaring that with the valuable iron golem material, he can finally get a new set of equipment. Once he is properly outfitted, he boasts he might even be able to challenge the area boss. Rokaru offers his thanks, explaining that even though he defeated the golem alone, he appreciates them sharing the spoils. He assures them he doesn't mind, as he got what he needed. Mika, however, lets out a weary sigh, thinking they could have sold it. His companion then asks what the plan is. With a confident thumbs up, Joe suggests that since they now have the strongest porter with them, they should venture a little deeper into the dungeon. Mika remarks that their part of the job is done, but she supposes it can't be helped. Rokaru affirms her unspoken concern, stating that the deeper they go, the stronger the monsters will become. A sharp, eager grin spreads across his face. Whether it be ogres or snakes, he thinks to himself, he simply cannot wait for the challenge. Following his lead, the party presses onward, eventually arriving at the entrance to the middle floors of the forest dungeon. Joe's spirits are high as he declares their luck is finally turning around. Their triumphant mood is cut short. One of them calls for the others to halt and look ahead. In the distance, near a large statue, they spot something amiss. As they draw closer, a grim scene comes into view. It's the bronze rank party they encountered earlier, completely wiped out at the very entrance to the new section. The party's knight is the only one still conscious, gasping for breath, his armor and face covered in blood. Nearby, the wizard lies motionless on ground. The adventurers stare in disbelief, wondering what on earth could have happened. He lifts a trembling, blood-soaked hand towards them. His face is a mask of terror as he desperately pleads for help. His voice choked as he warns them of a monster. His warning of a monster materializes in a horrifying vision. A massive, dark beast with leathery wings descends upon the last standing member of the bronze rank party, a female warrior who holds her ground with a sword and banner. The creature crashes down with devastating force, sending debris flying. Joe voices the party's shared shock, questioning if this is the monster they were warned about. With his last breath, the dying knight urges them to prepare themselves. As the dust settles, the true threat is revealed. A colossal, white-furred beast with multiple tails. Rokaru and his companions stare in stunned disbelief. Joe mutters that it can't be real, that he must be kidding. The monstrous beast stands over the carnage, the mangled body of the female warrior clamped in its bloody jaws. Lying amidst the rubble, the knight looks up in utter despair, unable to comprehend how something so immense could possibly be a kobold. Unfazed by the horrific scene, Rokaru steps forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. He calmly addresses his stunned companions, ordering them all to stand back. He declares that this monster is his prey. The beast lifts its blood-soaked muzzle, its eyes locking onto the new challenger. A savage thought crosses its mind. It can finally have some real fun. In response, Rokaru meets its gaze with a confident, almost eager smile, ready to engage the formidable foe. On a stone walkway above churning water, the nameless warrior, Rokaru, stands with his katana drawn. He faces the massive, white-furred beast, a tense standoff before the inevitable clash. His companions watch from a safe distance, their faces etched with alarm. Mika recognizes the creature with a gasp, while Joe questions in disbelief if Rokaru truly intends to fight it. Nearby, the defeated bronze-ranked knight lies bloodied on the ground. He identifies the creature as an ogre, the boss of the middle floor, and realizes that a normal kobold would never have stood a chance against such a foe, implying the beast was his undoing. Lilia explains to a startled Mika that it is against the laws of nature for monsters to kill one another. This strange fact means the creature before them cannot be a normal kobold. Her mind flashes back to a previous journey to the royal capital, where she was attacked by two kobolds. She recalls that one of them had the very same wound on its right eye as the monster, now facing Rokaru. A dreadful possibility begins to dawn on her. As if to confirm its unnatural power, the beast lunges forward, shattering the stone floor with a single stomp. Rokaru leaps back, narrowly avoiding the impact, as his party looks on in shock at the display of raw force. He whirls around, shouting at his companions to get out of there, warning that they will only be a hindrance. Joe immediately agrees, urging the others to leave, but then notices that Lilia is no longer with them. The adventurer tells her to go back and treat the injured in a safe place, asking what she intends to do. With quiet determination, Lilia states that she is not leaving. She steps forward onto the causeway, staff in hand, her expression resolute. She declares that whatever happens here, she will see it through to the end. Rokaru glances back, his gaze sharp and focused. With a monstrous beast looming behind him, he accepts her decision and turns his full attention to the imminent battle. He turned to Lilia with a smirk, expressing surprise that she hadn't been the first to flee the danger. Standing her ground, she retorted that his comment was rude, reminding him that she is, after all, a goddess. His gaze hardened as he declared the creature his prey. He repeated his command for her to stay back and simply watch. Without another word, he lunged forward, closing the distance to the beast. In response to the challenge, the white-furred monster dropped into a low, aggressive crouch, its massive jaw gaping in a silent, threatening roar. Undeterred, Rokaru leaped into striking range, raising his katana high for a powerful downward slash. His blade met not flesh, but the creature's thick forearm. The monster blocked the steel with its bare limb, the impact sending a shockwave through the air. The sheer force of the block threw him backward. As he regained his footing, he glanced at his weapon, realizing with concern that the blade was already starting to take damage from the creature's unnatural durability. Before he could formulate a new strategy, the monster lunged forward to press its advantage. Watching from the sidelines, Lyra's eyes widened in alarm as she cried out a warning for him to move quickly. He reacted with fluid grace, dropping low and sliding beneath the beast's attack. In a single motion, he twisted around its flank, emerging behind it with a confident smirk, ready to counter. From her vantage point, Lyra noted that while Rokaru was unmatched in speed, his attacks seemed to have no effect. Her thoughts were interrupted by a startling discovery. The shattered remains of the iron golem on the ground nearby were still moving, as if it were still breathing. Then, a realization dawned. She understood that Rokaru's last attack was a feint, designed to draw the monster's attention so she could safely approach the golem. She was surprised that he would care enough to help it. She quickly dismisses his explanation. Rokaru claims he let the other adventurers escape simply because they were in the way, but Lyra understands that isn't the real reason. Her realization solidifies. In the end, he just wanted to enjoy the fight. As this thought crosses her mind, Rokaru moves towards an open doorway, just as the white-furred monster crashes through it, lunging into the chamber. The beast roars, slamming its powerful fist into a stone pillar and sending fragments flying. Rokaru deftly sidesteps the improvised attack, a slight smile on his face. He observes that the monster used the pillar as a deliberate attack, acknowledging its cunning. "So you can use your head a little," he remarks, impressed. Using the dust cloud from the previous impact as cover, Rokaru dashes past the massive, white-furred kobold. The beast snaps its jaws shut just behind him, its sharp teeth glinting as it snarls in frustration. He pivots with a confident smirk, observing that the poor visibility favors the smaller combatant. He concludes that his monstrous opponent is not clever enough to understand this tactical disadvantage. In the next instant, his blade plunges deep into the kobold's chest. Simultaneously, he drives the palm of his other hand into its solar plexus, the impact shattering the creature's torso and creating a dark, gaping wound. The beast's head is thrown back in a silent scream. Elsewhere, the bronze-ranked knight stares blankly, his face streaked with blood and grime from a recent battle. Behind him, his party's wizard raises her staff, chanting a healing spell to mend his grievous injuries. As the restorative magic takes effect, the wizard tells him he's lucky to be alive. The knight, still trembling, counters that the monster they fought possessed strength and speed on a completely different level. Scowling, she dismisses his assessment, calling his perspective skewed for thinking mere survival was a victory. His eyes widen in terror as the full weight of their encounter crashes down on him. Sweat drips down his face as he comes to a horrifying realization. They are all going to die. Back at the other battle, Rokaru vaults backward through a shattered window, flipping through the air to create distance between himself and his foe. He lands smoothly on a lower rooftop as Lilia and Mika watch from afar. Lilia cries out his name in alarm just as the floor above him erupts, showering the area with debris. Looking up, he sees the kobold perched on the ruined ledge, the massive wound in its chest wide open. He notes with grim curiosity that the creature doesn't seem to feel any pain, despite having its innards gouged out. How strange. Lilia voices her thoughts, stating that the kobold is unnatural. Rokaru agrees, adding that its ability to ignore such damage goes against the natural laws of all living things. He stands ready, sword in hand, contemplating this impossible enemy. He confirmed her unspoken question, stating that this creature smelled exactly the same as the one he had killed before. As she looked on in surprise, he casually rested the sword on his shoulder, declaring that it didn't matter. If it came back to life, he would simply kill it again. With that, he surged forward, proclaiming that the strong devouring the weak is the universal law of any age. The white-furred beast met his charge with a devastating punch that shattered the stone floor, but the swordsman deftly evaded the blow. It followed with a sweeping strike. He raised his katana to parry, his eyes widening as the immense force of the impact met his blade. Under the overwhelming power of the blow, his sword shattered, the broken blade skittering across the ground. Before he could react, the monster's massive hand seized his face. From a distance, Lyra cried out in horror, realizing his sword was gone. The creature effortlessly hurled him across the room, sending him crashing violently against the far wall. Seeing him downed, Lilia stepped forward, her staff beginning to glow. She cursed inwardly, admitting to herself that she was not skilled with offensive magic. As she prepared to act, the bloodied warrior roared her name, warning her not to get in his way. He crouches low, a wild grin spreading across his bloodied face. He admits he didn't want to break the borrowed sword, but now, unburdened, he can fight without any worries. In response to this sudden confidence, the kobold bellows in confusion, questioning how he can possibly fight without any weapons. The warrior doesn't answer, instead surging forward to close the distance. He ducks under a massive, swiping claw, the stone floor shattering where the blow lands. With incredible agility, he sidesteps another attack, positioning himself right against the monster's leg. From this dangerously close range, he drives his fist directly into the side of the kobold's knee joint. The impact sends a visible shockwave through the creature's limb. Watching from afar, Lilia's eyes widen as she understands his strategy. He's targeting its joints. The beast stumbles, its leg buckling. Rokaru presses his advantage, twisting the creature's arm and delivering a sharp kick to its elbow, forcing the joint to bend unnaturally. Despite the targeted assault, the kobold sneers, declaring that fighting is painful, and even more so with bare hands. It mockingly calls him a pitiful dog. The warrior counters the taunt, explaining that if there is neither death nor pain, then there is no reason to fight. It is the pain, he proclaims with intense conviction, that reminds them of their fear of death and their thirst for life, and thus provides the very reason to fight. With a final, devastating strike, Rokaru drives his hands deep into the chest of the massive, white-furred monster, shattering its core. He lands lightly as the beast collapses behind him. Wiping sweat from his brow, he remarks that it was quite a workout. Lilia, watching from the steps, expresses her disbelief that he defeated it with his bare hands. But as he stands over the fallen creature, its body begins to emit a strange black mist, startling both him and Lilia as it starts to dissolve. The mist dissipates, leaving behind a corpse that has inexplicably shrunk. Roker notes this is unusual, as bodies don't normally shrink upon death. Lilia adds that she has never heard of black mist either. He turns to Lilia, asking if cases of corpses resurrecting are common in this world. She explains that while monsters like ghosts and skeletons exist, it is definitely not normal for a kobold to reanimate and go berserk. Her words hang in the air as they both gaze at the massive, jagged hole torn through the stone wall, contemplating the unnatural events that have just transpired. Meanwhile, from a safe distance, the group of adventurers who had been observing the battle, Joe, Lem, Mika, and the bronze rank party, watch the aftermath unfold. Their quiet observation is broken as they see Rokaru begin to walk away from the scene, heading directly toward their position. He walks past them without a word, casually carrying the severed head of the monster and giving a friendly wave, leaving the entire group of adventurers in stunned silence. His destination is a local forge, where he presents the monster's claws to the blacksmith, Pinya. He confirms that with this much material, there shouldn't be a problem. She agrees to make the goods and tells him to return in a few days. With a bright smile, Rokaru says he's looking forward to it. He bids farewell to the blacksmith, Pinya, who waves back with a confident smile, gesturing for him to return later. As he departs, she turns her attention to the crate of monster parts, murmuring to herself that she is looking forward to the challenge. Inside her workshop, surrounded by schematics and tools, Pinya sits before her forge and reaffirms her commitment to do her absolute best. Meanwhile, Rokaru rejoins Lilia. She stretches her arms wide, expressing immense relief that she can finally rest for a few days. He suggests it's a great opportunity to explore the royal capital. She dismisses the idea for the moment, explaining with a wink that her first priority is a nice, long bath at the inn. After that, she notes, she also has to report to the Adventurers Guild. Lilia proposes that they meet again at Pinya's workshop in 3 days. Rokaru agrees to the plan, and they part ways for their respective rests. Over the next couple of days, each of them finds their own way to recover. Pinya works tirelessly at her forge, Lilia relaxes in a bath, and Rokaru rests peacefully, both indoors and perched high in a tree overlooking the city. 2 days pass. Late at night, an unsettling stillness hangs over the city rooftops. Inside her room, Lilia is startled by a glow from outside her window. Hoping it's nothing serious, she wonders if it could be a fire. Her eyes widen in horror as she presses her face to the glass, recognizing the location of the blaze, the blacksmith district. She is startled by a townsman's panicked cry, who shouts that a fire has broken out. The blaze erupts suddenly, catching Pinya and the other blacksmiths completely by surprise amidst the sparks and smoke of their forges. Hearing the commotion, Rokaru rushes out to meet Lilia. She confirms his fears, telling him that it's the blacksmith district that is up in flames. He wastes no time, sprinting past her and heading directly toward the growing inferno. Upon reaching the district's entrance, they are confronted by a scene of utter devastation. The overwhelming sight causes Lilia to collapse to her knees in shock. She stares into the blaze, her hand covering her mouth as she whispers in disbelief. Rokaru's expression is grim, his eyes fixed on the destruction. His concern for the young blacksmith overriding everything else, he stands before the raging fire and desperately shouts Pinya's name. In the aftermath of a violent explosion, a blacksmith shop lies in ruins, engulfed in a raging inferno. Smoke and embers fill the air as Rokaru and Lilia stand before the utter devastation. Arriving on the scene with the garrison, Leon Cartwright immediately takes command. He shouts for his men to take their positions and extinguish the fire before it spreads, stressing that there may be survivors inside who must be rescued at all costs. His orders galvanize the onlookers and soldiers into action, forming a frantic bucket brigade to combat the flames. Amidst the chaos, as Leon pulls Lilia to safety, Rokaru prepares to act. After being doused with a bucket of water, he charges forward and leaps directly into the heart of the raging fire. He emerges moments later from the smoldering, skeletal remains of the workshop, his body covered in soot. His search was fruitless. As Lilia approaches through the haze, she asks for Pinya's whereabouts. Rokaru can only report that he does not know. She either escaped or perished within the flames. Leon then walks over to the pair, formally thanking Rokaru for his cooperation and admitting his surprise that the warrior would willingly jump into such a dangerous fire. He kneels, explaining that the garrison will now take over to investigate the scene and identify the cause of the fire. Rokaru looks on intently, questioning the word cause. Leon lists the possibilities: carelessness, spontaneous combustion, or something else entirely. Before he can finish, Rokaru cuts in, his face grim, stating with conviction that it was arson. His assertion gives Leon pause. The captain explains that blacksmithing is a dangerous profession involving fire, and because of this, the royal capital imposes strict penalties on any smith who causes one. The severity of the punishment will depend entirely on their on-site investigation, making it a matter of great responsibility. He continues to explain the severe penalties to Lilia, noting that if negligence or mismanagement of the fire is proven, Pinya could be stripped of her business rights, imprisoned, or even banished. Lilia listens with a look of grave concern. He concludes that, one way or another, it would be impossible for her to work as a blacksmith in the royal capital again. Rokaru and Lilia stand amidst the smoldering ruins, absorbing the grim reality of the situation. As he processes this, Rokaru takes a determined step forward on the charred ground. He quietly acknowledges Leon's point, but asserts that if there is a culprit, it is not Pinya. He turns and begins to walk away without another word. Lilia, surprised by his abrupt departure, calls out, asking where he is going. Leon looks on, momentarily taken aback. She presses him again, demanding to know their destination. Rokaru, looking over his shoulder, asks her if she knows where they live. Lilia, confused by the question, can only respond with a bewildered huh. He clarifies his intentions, stating with certainty that Pinya is alive and that it was the thugs who started the fire. He identifies the culprits as the Jordani family, a name that shocks Lilia. As they walk, he explains the Jordani family's methods. It is their way of business, he says, to kidnap weak women and children. He elaborates that they use these hostages so the stronger ones cannot fight back. His hand clenches into a tight fist as he speaks, his voice filled with cold fury. He tells Lilia that for Pinya, the shop and her work were her pride and reason for living, and the Jordani family has sullied and trampled on that. His face is a mask of grim determination, his hair whipping around him as if stirred by his own intensity. He declares that for what they have done, they are no longer people. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room, Pinya is on her knees, her hands bound. The thug leader stands over her, tauntingly explaining that this is what happens when someone defies the Jordani family. He adds that if she had just paid them back, she wouldn't have been beaten and lost her job. She remains on her knees in a sparsely furnished room, captive before the man seated at a distant table. He watches her with an air of detached amusement, a bottle resting beside him. Her expression is one of silent contempt, refusing to show fear. Leaning forward with his chin resting on his clasped hands, Bruno Jordani goads her, his voice laced with cruel amusement. He urges her to cry and scream for him, clearly enjoying her powerlessness. As her defiance persists, one of his men intervenes. The thug leader violently yanks her head back by her hair, roaring that she's an unsightly excuse for a dwarf. Bruno Jordani merely watches the assault from his seat, his expression remaining cold and detached. On the rough wooden floor, Lilia desperately reaches for a long, cloth-wrapped object, Rokaru's sword. Looking down on her, Bruno Jordani notes with disdain that she has been clinging to it for some time, questioning how important it could possibly be. As he bends to take it, she lunges forward, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength and crying out for him to stop. Her grip tightens, her expression hardening with defiance. She declares that someone is waiting for this, and because of that, she will not let go. Her unexpected resolve gives him a moment of pause, his expression unreadable as he considers her words. The pause is fleeting. He retaliates with a vicious kick to her stomach, sending her sprawling. As she lies on the floor, blood dripping from her lips, he scoffs, calling her a stupid wench for still not understanding her position. He kneels over her broken form, grabbing a handful of her hair. He tells her to listen, presenting her with two choices. He can sell her into slavery, or she can become his lifelong worker. Forcing her head up to meet his gaze, he leans in close, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he declares that she is his property now. He stands, looking down at her with an air of finality while his men watch. He calmly states that he wants her to understand this new reality. Behind her, his 3 thugs loom, their expressions a mix of cruel amusement and menace, ready to enforce their master's will. Inside the workshop, the thug leader grins sadistically over captive Pinya. He declares his intention to beat her thoroughly, telling her to prepare herself. Pinya, with blood trickling from her lip, glares back with defiant eyes. Before he can act on his threat, a hand suddenly clamps over his mouth, stifling his words. Another hand, gripping a piece of splintered wood, appears beside him. The thug's eyes widen in confused shock. In an instant of brutal force, the attacker slams the thug's face directly into the floorboards. The wood splinters and shatters on impact, the sudden violence stunning the other thugs as they witness their leader being taken down by Rokaru. This explosive confrontation began just moments before, when Rokaru and Lilia appeared in the doorway. Lilia's voice had cut through the tension, demanding the thugs surrender and release Pinya, who looked up from the ground with wide, hopeful eyes. The remaining thugs turned their attention to another man in the room, Bruno Jordani. One of them reports that the 2 newcomers are the same ones who interfered with their plans before. Bruno coolly regards them and asks who they are. He smirks, remarking that their arrival saves him the trouble of having to look for them. With a casual air, Bruno orders his men to take care of the pair. In response, Rokaru gives a quick instruction to Lilia, telling her to take care of Pinya. Without hesitation, he then launches himself toward the group of armed thugs. He moves like a blur, his fists becoming weapons. A single punch sends one thug flying backward across the room, his face bloodied. Rokaru flows through the remaining men, disabling them with swift, precise, and overwhelming force. In mere moments, the fight is over. The thugs lie scattered and broken on the floor. Standing amidst the aftermath, Rokaru makes a cold declaration. He will keep one man alive. He clarifies his grim purpose. The single survivor will be made to testify about setting fire to Pinya's shop. As for the rest, he announces with chilling finality, he is killing them right now. The conscious thugs can only stare back in terror. He stood amidst the wreckage of his own making, the thugs strewn across the floor like discarded dolls. As he surveyed the scene, Lilia rushed to Pinya's side, expressing her relief that the young blacksmith was safe. His voice cut through the quiet aftermath. He explained that the men had stained her pride, an act that had made him uncharacteristically emotional. Sensing a shift in his demeanor, Lilia grabbed Pinya's arm, urging her to come away. She warned that he was dangerous, a statement that left Pinya momentarily confused. Ignoring Lilia's warning, she looked up at the swordsman, her face bruised and a trickle of blood on her lip. She uttered his name, Rokaru, her voice quiet and filled with a complex mix of emotions. His gaze met hers. Pinya's expression shifted from fear to fierce resolve. She declared that she had been waiting for him, with the katana ready. With wide, determined eyes, she urged him to use it well. Her words hung in the air, drawing attention to a long, cloth-wrapped object on the floorboards, the very weapon she had forged for him. It lay between her and a last standing thug, an offering and a challenge. In response to her declaration, a slow, knowing smile spread across Rokaru's lips, hinting at the violence to come. Inside a tavern, Rokaru explodes into action. He ducks under a wild swing and launches into a powerful spinning kick, striking 2 of Bruno Jordani's thugs at once. With a single, commanding word, he orders them to move. Unmoved, Bruno Jordani draws his own blade, a rapier, with a look of cold confidence. He warns the swordsman not to think it will be that easy. In response, Rokaru closes the distance instantly. As their blades clash, he uses his free hand to snatch a bottle from a nearby table, shattering it against a wooden pillar to create a makeshift weapon. Bruno flinches from the spray of glass. Shouting for his opponent to wait, he attempts to counter, but Rokaru is already moving, sweeping low to knock Bruno's feet from under him. As his opponent stumbles, Rokaru vaults onto a table and brings the pommel of his still-sheathed sword down hard across Bruno's face with a brutal crack. With Bruno reeling and clutching his bleeding face, Rokaru stands over him. He states that it is not Bruno he intends to cut down, but rather what he foolishly tried to take. Dazed, Bruno questions if he means Jordani. He corrects him with fierce intensity, declaring that what Bruno threatened was the pride of Pinya. Rokaru's entire demeanor shifts as he prepares to draw his blade for a final strike. From a distance, Pinya's voice cries out, urging Rokaru on. Fueled by her encouragement, he grips the hilt of his katana with both hands, his eyes narrowed in absolute concentration. He unleashes his technique, a blindingly fast 2-stage slash that cuts through the air with lethal precision. The blade finds its mark. Bruno Jordani is thrown backward, a fatal wound erupting from his chest as his lifeblood sprays into the air. His body lays still on the floor, blood pooling from the fatal wound. Rokaru stood over him, katana held ready, his expression cold and resolute. Beside him, Pinya stared with wide, astonished eyes at the swift conclusion of the duel. As the dust settled, the heavy thud of a footstep on the wooden floorboards announced an unexpected arrival. Rokaru's gaze snapped towards the sound, a flicker of surprise on his face. He questioned the newcomer, asking what the matter was and mockingly wondering if this was all their so-called pride amounted to. The source of the sound was a towering, monstrously muscular man. His face, splattered with blood, was twisted into a crazed grin as he declared that it wouldn't be so easy. Sensing the immense danger, Rokaru shoved Lilia and Pinya behind him, shouting for them to get back. The massive man stood fully revealed, his bare chest marked by a fresh, bleeding X-shaped wound. Unfazed, his manic grin widened as he challenged Rokaru, eagerly inviting him to a second round. The manic brawler lunges forward, his fist clenched and a wide, crazed grin stretching across his face. Rokaru stands his ground, his katana raised to block the powerful blow, the impact sending a shockwave through the air. The sheer force of the attack sends him sliding backward, his feet carving deep gouges into the wooden floor. After steadying himself, his gaze darts towards his companions, and he urgently shouts Liera's name. She turns, her eyes wide with alarm as she takes in the destructive scene. "What is that?" she murmurs, watching the confrontation unfold from the relative safety of the doorway. He yells to her that she can freeze later. For now, she must go outside and block the entrance, preventing anyone from getting in or out. Though she tells him to be careful, Liera understands and agrees to the plan. Now outside the building, she turns to the young dwarf beside her. "Pinya, stand back," she commands, preparing to act. From her sleeve, she produces an ornate staff tipped with a dark orb. With a determined expression, she points it toward the ground and incants. Earth wall. A massive, jagged barrier of rock and soil erupts from the earth, sealing the building's entrance. Pinya stares in awe at the magical construction. Liera, however, looks on with a troubled expression, realizing this is just like what happened with the bears the other day. After being mortally wounded, they had reanimated, but stronger. She doesn't want to think about it, but she feels it's unlikely to be a coincidence. A sense of unease settles over her as she realizes something big is stirring that she doesn't understand. Inside, the battle rages on, with Rokaru facing the towering brawler amidst the bodies of his fallen comrades. On the other side of the new barrier, a group of men pound on the wall, demanding to know what's happening. Their confusion turns to terror as they see the thug leader crawling away, screaming for everyone to run from the monster. The manic brawler's face appears in a gap, his grin wide and predatory as he asks what they're so scared of. The manic brawler's presence instilled a deep-seated fear in his former allies. The thug leader, sweating and bloodied, turned to his men, acknowledging their shared understanding of the grim situation. He told them they knew what was coming next, and that now they had to choose. The choice was presented by the brawler himself, his face split by a wide, predatory grin. He gave them an ultimatum: fight for him, or be killed by him. Opposite the monster stood Rokaru, his expression calm and his katana held ready. He met the brawler's gaze and issued a simple command: fight for me. Hearing Rokaru's challenge, the thug leader panicked. He turned to the swordsman, pleading desperately, insisting they were only following their boss's orders. He cried out that he never knew the man they were working with was actually a monster. His pleas escalated into a raw, terrified scream for help. His eyes were wide with horror as he begged for his life, but Rokaru remained unmoved, his hand resting firmly on the hilt of his blade. The thug leader collapsed to the floor, his terror giving way to incredulous despair. He looked up at the silent swordsman, wondering to himself how anyone could be so stupid as to provoke the creature. Rokaru, however, paid him no mind. His fingers tightened around the grip of his katana as he spoke, his voice low and steady. He stated that, as he had said before, all he needed was one witness. With his intent clear, he launched himself from the rafters above. As the thugs scattered in terror, he descended upon them, sword drawn, declaring that the charade was now over. The massive brawler roars in fury, questioning why his opponent is looking away. In that split second of distraction, the nameless warrior is already in motion, twisting through the air to deliver a powerful blow with the hilt of his sword to another thug's face. He lands softly amidst the bodies of other defeated men. The thug leader, seeing the carnage, points a trembling finger, shouting that he recognizes the warrior. He was the one who went to the scene of their boss's business. His companion panics, accusing the leader of selling him out. Desperate, the man turns to the warrior, pleading for his life and promising to testify and tell the truth about what happened. A faint, knowing smile spreads across the warrior's face. He has his confirmation. He has found the culprit. He announces his decision to let the man live, then moves with blinding speed. A swift strike with his sword's hilt to the back of the thug leader's neck sends the man crumpling to the floor, unconscious. With the lesser threats neutralized, he turns his full attention to the muscular brawler. He offers a calm apology for the delay, addressing the man as Jordani. The brawler's face twists into a monstrous grin, his tongue flicking out as he compliments the warrior's skills. The warrior, in turn, raises his unique blade, stating that they are about to have some fun. His opponent's body begins to contort and swell with dark energy. He boasts that this power, a gift from the true god, will now be unleashed. Horns sprout from his head, and his skin darkens as he transforms into a demonic beast. The transformation completes, and the creature, no longer human, lunges forward with terrifying speed and force. It closes the distance in an instant, its massive, monstrous form bearing down on the lone warrior, who stands ready to meet the charge. He twisted aside, narrowly evading a devastating blow that tore through the floorboards where he had been standing just a moment before. The sheer force of the missed attack sent splinters and debris flying through the air. Landing in a low crouch, he looked up at his transformed foe, calmly observing, "So that's the power of your god." The monstrous enforcer, momentarily confused by the lack of fear, sneered back, declaring that the swordsman had clearly put his faith in the wrong deity. A confident, almost predatory smile spread across his face. He countered that if his opponent had received a blessing from a god, then the same was unfortunately true for him. Gripping his katana, he announced that tonight's offering to his own goddess would be a monster's head. The enforcer's face contorted with rage at the declaration. In that same instant, the swordsman exploded into motion, surging forward across the ruined floor with his blade held low. His blade met its target with unimaginable force. In a single, blinding flash, the monstrous form of the enforcer was utterly annihilated, his body disintegrating into nothingness as the warrior passed straight through him. A sudden eruption of black, shadowy flames burst from a building's window. Nearby, Lilia reacts with alarm, instinctively moving to shield the startled Pinya from the blast. The conflagration consumes the structure, not with fire, but with a roiling mass of dark smoke. The two stand before the unsettling destruction, watching the unnatural blaze. From within the roiling smoke, a monstrous, shadowy face with glowing eyes and a jagged maw materializes, looming over the young woman. Just as suddenly as it appeared, the shadowy vortex dissipates into the sky. Lilia looks up, startled by its abrupt disappearance. Her momentary confusion is broken by the arrival of Leon Cartwright, the captain of the Royal Capital Garrison. He demands to know about the scream and the fire, then eyes her suspiciously, asking if she is the arsonist. Lilia quickly denies the accusation, insisting she was merely passing by. Before he can press the matter, a dark-gloved hand suddenly reaches out from the side, snatching a piece of rubble from the ground. The hand belongs to Rokaru, who appears with a wide grin, holding the dazed thug leader by the head. He cheerfully announces to Leon that he has caught the arsonist. Lilia watches with a suppressed laugh, amused by the supposed coincidence. The captured man vehemently denies the accusation, claiming he was just behaving badly, but Pinya shouts for him to shut up. Leon interjects, stating that regardless of whether he is the culprit, they must question him thoroughly. At this, Pinya steps forward to address Leon directly. She tells him that while Rokaru and Lilia might seem crazy, they helped her. She looks at them with a gentle smile, finishing her thought. She declares that they are not bad people, and that she owes them both. Letting out a weary sigh, Captain Leon Cartwright seems to acquiesce, while Rokaru and Pinya watch his reaction with contrasting expressions of calm and cheer. Having made his decision, he barks orders to his men, instructing them to extinguish the fire and take the captured arsonist to a holding cell. He then commands them to establish a perimeter, declaring his intent to inspect the scene personally. His immediate duties assigned, the captain turns to Rokaru's group. He acknowledges their fatigue, but explains he has work for them and requests they accompany him, assuring them he doesn't doubt their story. Rokaru agrees. Lilia quietly affirms, and Pinya simply complains that she's sleepy. As they walk through the town, Rokaru asks Pinya about the still unfinished katana. Pinya begins to point out an issue with the handle, while Lilia asks if there's anything strange. Rokaru simply comments that it's not bad for a first attempt. Unseen by them, a lone figure watches from a nearby rooftop. From his high vantage point, a man in a formal suit observes the group as they proceed down the cobblestone street, his posture rigid and attentive. He opens a gloved hand, revealing two small, dark pellets. He muses to himself that, as he thought, this low-quality medicine can only produce such weak results. Clenching his fist over the pellets, the man concludes that improvements will be necessary before they can be used in the field. At that exact moment, Rokaru's head snaps around, his eyes narrowing as if sensing the distant observer. His sudden halt makes Lilia turn back in concern, asking what's wrong. Rokaru glances back toward the rooftops before dismissing it as nothing. Nearby, an elderly man in a turban watches the exchange. Later, while resting in a bath, Lilia remarks that even Rokaru must get tired. Pinya agrees, adding that she's also tired and that several of her bones are broken, much to Lilia's shock. From around a corner, the same elderly man overhears this. He wonders why she didn't say so earlier, but quickly decides it's fine. He then utters a single, powerful word. Heal. Lilia holds up a staff, its top adorned with a glowing orb and metal rings. A look of pride and accomplishment brightens her face as she explains its significance. She declares that simply finding the artifact was a great achievement in itself, identifying it as the legendary goddess's Kakura. In a sprawling city built upon a terraced hill, a grand castle overlooks the bustling market streets and tiled rooftops below. Approaching one of the city's establishments, Lilia and Rokaru are greeted by Pinya, who emerges from the doorway. Lilia praises the young blacksmith's admirable return to work. Inside, a friendly man in an apron welcomes them, confirming their identities as Lilia and Rokaru, names he learned from Pinya. He serves him drinks as the young dwarf sips from her own mug. His expression softens as he explains that Pinya's late father used to take care of her. He confesses he had been worried about her ever since her father passed away and never imagined things would turn out so well. Bowing slightly, the man sincerely thanks them for saving Pinya and encourages them to enjoy themselves. From behind the counter, Pinya watches them with a content look. As they sit, Lilia remarks that the owner seems like a nice person, and Rokaru agrees. He then notes that since she has a workshop, she can continue her blacksmithing, adding that he can reforge her katana as well. She clarifies that the material from the iron golem is a sufficient aggregate of steel for now. Pinya then chimes in, explaining that materials for various other monsters can also be used to craft weapons. Leaning forward with a confident smile, Pinya makes them an offer. Whenever they obtain any monster materials, they should bring them to her, and she will forge any kind of weapon they desire. Her offer seems to remind Rokaru of his purpose for being there. As he shifts in his seat, Pinya asks him what it was he wanted. He answers by placing a heavy sack on the table, explaining that he has come into a large sum of money and is there to pay off his debt for the katana. Lilia advises Pinya not to think too hard about the source of the money, while the young blacksmith, in awe of the payment, begins to eat heartily. Having settled the debt, he and Lilia take their leave. From her workshop, Pinya waves enthusiastically, inviting them to visit again anytime. As they walk away, Liera's mood turns gloomy. She points out that he paid for the katana with money stolen from thugs, but Rokaru counters that money taken from slain enemies is rightfully earned. Still, he concedes that they need to start earning their funds through proper means. The conversation shifts to the drugs possessed by the Jordani family. Lilia states with conviction that they must investigate who is distributing them and for what purpose. Rokaru agrees, acknowledging that their path is about to become much more demanding. He notices her apprehension and questions if she's feeling weak, reminding her that she sought him out for a reason. With a confident look, he promises to protect her from any foe, whether monster or human, and tells her to simply follow his lead. Her expression softens at his reassurance. Looking up at him with gratitude, she quietly says thank you. She reflects internally that while Rokaru's training is harsh, she cannot complain because she must get stronger quickly. Her thoughts are cut short as two imposing, fully armored figures suddenly block their path. The two figures, knights of the garrison, are moving with urgency. One wonders aloud about the reason for the rush, speculating that something significant must have occurred. As the knights hurry past, Rokaru calls out to them, asking what is happening. One of the knights turns back to warn them that monsters have appeared on the main road and that they should seek shelter indoors immediately. He watches them depart, his expression turning serious. He remarks to Lilia that the situation is suspicious. Monsters appearing on a main road so close to the royal capital is highly unusual. Believing it could be a clue, he decides they should investigate. He and Lilia raced along the stone road leading towards the capital's main gate. The urgency of the situation was palpable, marked by a lone garrison helmet left abandoned on the path ahead. Arriving at the scene, they found a contingent of garrison knights holding a defensive line. Before them stood the source of the commotion, two colossal bears, walking upright and encased in heavy plate armor. The sight was so unbelievable that Lilia could only stare in disbelief, murmuring that it couldn't be possible. Rokaru, however, met the bizarre threat with a wide, eager grin, a sound of pure excitement escaping his lips. Observing the chaos from a distance, Rokaru recognizes the lone warrior confronting one of the massive armored bears. He points him out to Lilia, noting that it's Leon and that he seems to be facing the beast alone. Lilia expresses her concern, questioning if he will be all right when even a squad of 10 knights is struggling against the other creature. Rokaru, however, remains unconcerned, simply suggesting they wait and see what happens. Her companion's casual attitude leaves Lilia baffled. A nearby garrison knight, overhearing their exchange, becomes incensed at what he perceives as disrespect. He shouts at Rokaru for being rude to Captain Leon. Lilia, confused, asks if Leon is famous, to which Rokaru admits he doesn't know him, having only just met. The knight, aghast at their ignorance, begins to list Leon's accolades. He explains that Leon is the heir to the renowned Cartwright martial arts household and was the most talented swordsman in their history. Despite this, he turned down the honor of leading the Kingsguard, proclaiming that his sword was meant to protect the weak. He continues his fervent explanation, declaring Leon the strongest swordsman on the continent, known by the title Sword Saint of Light. His reputation is so great that he is praised alongside legendary figures like the S-ranked adventurer Black Flame and the Empire's Clown. As the knight boasts, Lilia kneels to tend to a wounded soldier. She glances back at Rokaru, cautioning him that if he moves too much, he'll reopen his own wound. Rokaru simply watches the distant confrontation, letting out a thoughtful sigh. He pays her warning little mind, his focus entirely on Leon. A slight, intrigued smile touches his lips as he murmurs the title to himself. Sword Saint, huh. At that very moment, the battle reaches its climax. The armored bear lunges, its massive clawed hands swiping through the air. Leon stands his ground, his expression utterly calm as he prepares to draw his weapon. In an instant that defies perception, Leon draws his sword. A brilliant flash of light erupts as he executes a single, impossibly fast slash, bisecting the monstrous bear before it can land its blow. The sudden, blindingly fast display leaves Lilia bewildered. She wonders aloud about the flash of light and how their positions seem to swap in an instant. Rokaru, however, watches with a knowing look, understanding that it was something far more complex than a simple change of position. He casually explains to the bewildered Lilia that the fight is already over, gesturing with a dismissive wave of his hand. She can only stare back, a question mark materializing from her confusion. His words prove true as the first armored bear stands motionless, dark energy dissipating from the fatal wound inflicted by Leon Cartwright. With a flick of his wrist, the captain clears his blade, his expression one of unwavering confidence. Watching this display, Lilia expresses her astonishment, admitting she couldn't even perceive the attack. Rokaru calmly observes that Leon possesses considerable skill, noting that he isn't even out of breath. In the background, the garrison knights erupt in cheers for their captain. Their celebration is cut short as the second armored bear roars to life, smashing the ground and sending the knights scattering in panic. Seeing that the knights are unable to handle the beast, he steps forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. He announces his intention to take over the fight. He charges the monster bear, confidently declaring that its armor is of no use against him. In a flash of movement, his blade slices through the thick plating on the creature's arm and shoulder. His initial assault complete, he launches himself high above the towering beast, positioning his katana for a powerful overhead strike. Suspended in the air, he reflects on his own attack. He considers it not bad, but the thought immediately follows that Leon accomplished the same feat with just one blow. Driven by this comparison, he lands and strides forward with renewed purpose, his outer robe cast aside. He resolves to match the captain's feat and take the creature down with a single blow as well. He lowered himself into a combat stance, katana held steady, as the massive armored bear thundered towards him, its roar echoing across the field. With focused intensity, the samurai brings his blade down, cleaving one of the armored bears in two with a single, devastating strike. He throws his head back and laughs, exhilarated by the fight, declaring that he can accomplish anything if he tries. The display leaves Leon and his companion stunned. The young woman marvels at his strength, identifying him as the strongest samurai she's ever seen, while Leon silently questions the stranger's identity, noting the clean, single-strike kill. Approaching the victorious warrior, Leon thanks Rokaru for his considerable help, acknowledging that he was the one who assisted with the incident related to Pinya. Rokaru demurs, suggesting that with Leon's skills, his help was likely unnecessary. He then hands the written emergency request for taking down the armored bears to Leon's companion, telling her that if she presents it to the guild, she'll surely receive a reward. She accepts it with delight, exclaiming at his thoughtfulness. As she and Rokaru walk on, Leon turns to address the assembled garrison knights. As they walk through a wooded area, Rokaru glances back, a thought forming in his mind. Perhaps the reason he came to this world was to eventually face Leon in a battle to the death. Meanwhile, Leon watches the samurai depart, remarking to a nearby knight that Rokaru is a mysterious man. He admits he has no desire to fight him, yet for some reason, he feels drawn to him. The two warriors continue on their separate paths, yet a shared understanding passes between them. Sooner or later, they both know they will cross swords. Having completed their respective tasks, the groups return to the city. Inside the bustling guild hall, Leon's companion notes the crowd, observing that many others, just like them, have finished their quests and are there to collect their payment. Later, at a tavern, the adventurers celebrate their success. A man with a bandaged nose raises his mug high, calling out a cheerful toast to the room. Inside the bustling tavern, Rokaru turns to Lilia, noticing her quiet gaze. He asks if she is hungry, teasing that she was looking at the food with an envious expression. She retorts, flustered, telling him to stop making her sound like a glutton. She then softens her tone, admitting that perhaps she is envious in a way. She confesses that she has been watching this world for a very long time, surrounded by the joyous faces of other adventurers. She elaborates that until she saw it with her own eyes, she never truly understood the expressions people made, or how desperately they lived each day for a simple pleasure like a single drink. Her gaze becomes distant as she reflects on the nature of humans. So fleeting, so fragile, so reckless. She never thought she would see the day where she would envy them. Rokaru listens, a slight smile on his face, and calls her words strange. He reminds her that the good parts of this world are the fruits of labor, and that right now, she is not some distant observer, but simply Lilia. As they walk through the Adventurers Guild Hall, he continues his counsel, telling her that instead of envying others, she should be drinking, eating, and enjoying herself. After all, he states, you only live once. His words are punctuated by a cheerful call from the reception counter. Giselle, the rabbit-eared receptionist, waves enthusiastically, welcoming Rokaru and Lilia, and noting it's been a while. Taking his advice to heart, Lilia smiles warmly and agrees that he is right. He approaches the counter, and Giselle asks how she can help. Rokaru presents the letter from the garrison captain, stating he is there to claim his reward. Giselle expresses her delight that he found a job and recognizes the letter, noting he must have come a long way. Suddenly, a condescending voice cuts through the din of the guild. A well-dressed man stands in a doorway with his arms spread wide, sarcastically asking for pardon from the filthy adventurers. Rokaru and Lilia turn, their expressions hardening at the interruption. The man pinches his nose in disgust, lamenting that he never thought he would have to come to such a filthy place. He complains loudly that it smells like a pigsty. He dismisses his own outburst, stating that it's fine since he's in a good mood. His gaze settles on the pair as he announces that he has, after all, found what he was looking for. Before Lilia can react, the man steps forward, taking her hand with a confident smile. He correctly identifies her as Lilia and, as she stares in stunned silence, introduces himself with a simple greeting. He then reveals his purpose. He is her future fiancé. The declaration leaves Lilia utterly shocked, her eyes wide with disbelief. In a bustling courtyard, a young nobleman with an air of importance approaches Lilia and Rokaru, offering a formal greeting directly to her. He leans in close, lifting her chin with his finger. He compliments her beauty before smugly declaring her to be his future fiancée. His touch is abruptly intercepted as another hand clamps down firmly on his wrist, stopping him. The hand belongs to Rokaru, who now stands protectively before Lilia. With a cold gaze, he informs the stranger that he seems to lack manners, regardless of who he might be. The nobleman recoils, clutching his wrist in disbelief. He retorts that he could say the same about Rokaru's attitude, demanding to know if the samurai understands who he is addressing. He regains his composure, striking a proud pose with a hand to his chest. He introduces himself with theatrical importance, Kristoff Fontaine. He continues with a confident smirk, clarifying that he is the eldest son of the Duke of Fontaine. The name causes a stir among nearby onlookers, who recognize the prestigious family. The revelation, however, is met with blank stares. The receptionist exclaims in shock, but Lilia turns to Rokaru, admitting she doesn't understand the situation at all. He confesses he doesn't either. Lilia's expression hardens into one of annoyance. She addresses Kristoff directly, stating that she doesn't care if his name is Fontaine or Millefeuille. She then demands, "I'm your what? Say that again." Her defiance was met not with anger, but with condescending amusement. Kristoff Fontaine commented that her assertiveness was befitting of a nobleman's wife, causing Lilia's face to tighten with irritation as onlookers began to chuckle. Rokaru stepped forward, asking why Kristoff was so suddenly focused on Lilia. The nobleman announced that it had been decided by his father that Lilia would be his wife, and he had come to greet her. When pressed for a reason, Kristoff dismissed Rokaru, stating that the political motivations were of no concern to him. Before the nobleman could say more, Lilia's voice cut through the air, her expression firm and her declaration absolute. "I refuse." Her blunt rejection shattered his composure. He stared, incredulous, before demanding to know why. He insisted that she was going to be with him, but Lilia turned her back on him. Leaning into Rokaru, she stated plainly that she wasn't interested and had decided to live her life the way she wanted. She then linked her arm with Rokaru's, looking up at him with a slight smile as she added that she had no interest in weak men. The insult struck its mark. Kristoff's face contorted with rage, the veins on his forehead bulging as he snarled, questioning if she was calling him weak. As the nobleman's anger flared, Rokaru casually placed a hand on his shoulder, advising the boy to give up and go home, adding that a man needs to know when to quit. With her eyes closed, Lilia affirmed this sentiment, stating that Kristoff was, indeed, extremely weak. This public humiliation pushed Kristoff to his limit. He trembled, clenching his teeth as the crowd murmured about the disrespect being shown to a nobleman, certain that the pair had sealed their fate. His composure finally shattered. Pointing a trembling finger at Rokaru, Kristoff roared that he had never been so ridiculed in his life and demanded they step outside so he could teach them some manners. He calmly grips the nobleman's wrist, halting the drawn sword. He states his aversion to meaningless killing and dismissively tells the fool to back off. Before he can push the issue further, Lilia's voice cuts through the tension, calling his name. He turns to her, a question in his eyes. She steps past him, her voice ringing with conviction. She refuses to be seen as a weakling who hides behind the strength of others, only to be belittled as they please. With fiery intensity, she stares directly at Kristoff and accepts the challenge herself. She will be his opponent, she proclaims, and she will be the one to show him his own weakness. Her declaration made, she strides forward into the open street, closing the distance to the stunned nobleman and his retinue. As the crowd murmurs in anticipation of a duel, a worried Giselle questions if Lilia will be all right. Rokaru, however, simply smiles. He reassures her, revealing that Lilia has been training with him every morning, appearances to the contrary. He elaborates with a knowing grin, acknowledging that while some might perceive her as gentle, the reality is that she possesses a wild spirit. In the dueling space, Lilia proves his point, her expression now one of fierce concentration. She holds a heavy staff tipped with a large, dark sphere from which a faint energy seems to glow. The sight leaves Giselle bewildered. Kristoff, recovering his composure, draws his rapier with a condescending smirk. He praises her spirit, remarking that she will be worth training. Unfazed, Lilia readies her weapon and tells him to begin. With a flourish of his blade, he mockingly invites her to make the first move. Seizing the opening without hesitation, she accepts his offer and surges forward, staff poised to strike. Her sudden burst of speed caught the nobleman completely off guard. His eyes widened as he realized just how fast she was. Before he could mount a proper defense, she sidestepped his sword and struck him squarely in the stomach with the butt of her staff. The force of the blow drove him to one knee, coughing as one of his guards cried out his name in alarm. He waved off the concern, insisting he was fine and had merely let his guard down. From the crowd, Rokaru cheered loudly for Lilia's excellent thrust, prompting a small, confident smile from her. Standing once more, he faced her across the courtyard. Lilia commented that she was glad he hadn't given up after just one hit. Kristoff acknowledged her sharp tongue, his expression hardening as he prepared to resume the fight. His initial shock now replaced with grim determination. He declared with a smirk that this time, he would be the one to take the initiative. He lunged forward, sword aimed in a direct thrust. But Lilia's focus was absolute. She realized she could see his attack coming. She ducked smoothly beneath the blade, his lunge carrying him past her. Her dodge created a perfect opening. Pivoting on her heel, she swung her staff around and struck his outstretched sword arm with immense force. The impact was devastating. Kristoff cried out and collapsed to his knees, his sword falling from his limp hand. From the sidelines, Rokaru observed the outcome with a calm smile, understanding that she had dislocated his joints. The duel was over. Standing over her defeated opponent, Lilia's voice was cold and clear. She told him to finally understand that he was weak, and that from now on, he should take that lesson to heart and live humbly. Kristoff could only glare up at her, his face a mask of pain and utter humiliation. His public disgrace was punctuated by the sounds of everyday life, as a young boy ran past, calling for his mother, completely oblivious to the nobleman's plight. His humiliation was not yet complete. As he knelt in defeat, a small boy approached, brandishing a sword. Kristoff cried out in alarm while, from a short distance, Rokaru and Lilia watched the scene unfold with hardened expressions. His fear quickly curdled into rage. "You rude brat," he seethed, raising his hand to strike the child. Before the blow could land, Rokaru's voice cut sharply through the air, commanding him to stop. He followed the command with a chilling promise, informing the nobleman that had he attempted to bring that sword down, his own head would have already been severed. The stark finality of the threat left Kristoff wide-eyed and speechless. The tense standoff was broken when a woman rushed to the boy's side, apologizing profusely for his behavior. Utterly defeated, Kristoff simply waved them away, telling them to go. As the pair scurried off, Lilia turned to Rokaru, her expression resolute. She announced that she had changed her mind and would no longer be taking him as her husband. Her words were cut short as Kristoff rose to his feet, a furious aura swirling around him. He declared that none should intervene until one of them yielded or died, then fixed his gaze on Lilia, vowing to carve a scar on her face that would last a lifetime. In response, Lilia's own power flared to life. She stated that she, too, had changed her mind. Had Rokaru not stopped him, Kristoff would have murdered that child, and for that act, she would show him no mercy. Her condemnation sent him into a frenzy. With a manic, wide-eyed grin, Kristoff lunged forward, screaming for her to die. His frenzied assault was met with a calm defense, as Lilia effortlessly parried his rapid thrust with her staff. She registered that he was much faster now, but she could still follow his movements. He pressed his attack, laughing and taunting her for being on the defensive. From the sidelines, Rokaru calmly advised Lilia to get her eyes used to the speed, remarking that it was only a matter of time before she was turned into Swiss cheese. He watches the duel, his mind dissecting the flow of combat. An opponent frustrated by being outmaneuvered will inevitably alter their movements, and that moment of change is precisely what reveals an opening. As if on cue, Kristoff lunges forward, his form breaking with desperation. Lilia's eyes narrow, recalling the lesson. That is the chance, and she must not miss it. She sidesteps his wild thrust with practiced ease, the tip of his blade passing harmlessly by her as she moves inside his guard. Pivoting on her heel, she swings the heavy base of her staff upward. Kristoff, caught off balance, can only watch as the weapon connects solidly beneath his chin. The impact is brutal, snapping his head back with a violent crack, his eyes wide with the shock of the blow. Her expression remains cold and focused, her grip tightening on her weapon as she prepares to end the confrontation. Before she can press her advantage, a new figure steps between them, planting his own staff firmly on the ground. Standing over the fallen Kristoff, the armored man declares that it is enough. He turns his gaze to Lilia, his tone calm but firm. He states that a duel without a witness is nothing more than a public lynching, and she should keep that in mind. From the ground, Kristoff glares up in humiliation. His attention then shifts across the dusty square to where Rokaru stands with the rescued child and his mother. The armored man addresses him respectfully as Reincarnates. The swordsman meets his gaze with a slight, knowing smile. The armored man entrusts him with keeping Lady Lilia in check before turning to depart, leaving the tense scene behind. He walked alongside Lilia through the town, having changed from his armor into a simple Haori. She sought his approval, asking if she had fought as he'd instructed. He looked at her and affirmed that for her first time, she had done well. As they continued, Lilia noted that her clothes were torn from the duel and proposed they go shopping the next day. With a smile, she urged him to accompany her for once. His attention, however, had drifted elsewhere. Sensing his distraction, Lilia asked if he was even listening. Instead of answering her, Rokaru spoke to the empty space ahead, calling out for whoever was following them to reveal themselves. From a nearby alley, a young woman in light armor emerged, startling Lilia. The newcomer apologized, admitting she had been following them since witnessing their fight in the square. She explained that after seeing the display, she simply couldn't hold herself back. Rokaru, unfazed, directly asked for her identity. Instead of just giving her name, the armored woman stood resolute and made a bold declaration, pleading with Rokaru to take her on as his apprentice. The unexpected request left both him and Lilia momentarily. In a desolate clearing, Rokaru stands with his hand on his chin, seriously contemplating how the situation had come to this. Across from him, the young armored girl declares she is ready, holding her sword in a preparatory stance. Her face shines with earnest enthusiasm as she addresses him respectfully, asking him to instruct her well and calling him Master Rokaru. He grimaces, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Internally, he curses Lilia, realizing she has pushed this entire responsibility onto him. The scene flashes back to an earlier conversation. Lilia, amused that he gained an apprentice after his first fight, suggests he should open a swordsmanship dojo. Rokaru dismisses the idea, claiming he is in no position to teach. Lilia then turns to the young girl, asking why she is so determined to get stronger when there are other jobs she could take, especially as she is still a child. The girl apologizes for not having explained herself properly. She introduces herself as Amelie, a 14-year-old apprentice adventurer. She then recounts her difficult circumstances. She comes from the slums and has a sick younger brother. Her parents died from the same illness a year prior, leaving her with the responsibility of earning money for his medicine. To make ends meet, she has been accompanying adventurers on simple requests, working as a porter. Amelie's expression grows more desperate as she continues. Recently, the monsters in the dungeons have increased in number and ferocity, and she has nearly died on what should have been simple jobs. She insists that she must get stronger because if she dies, her brother will not be able to survive. Listening, Lilia realizes the child is another victim of the abnormal situation that has sprung up in the world. Her story told, Amelie asks with renewed hope if he will really train her. Lilia, touched, tells Rokaru that such a brave girl is rare. He questions if he truly has the leisure for this, but Lilia simply smiles, cheerfully entrusting Amelie to his care before departing. Rokaru is left stunned as she passes the responsibility to him. He watches her leave, thinking to himself that she is a wild spirit. He then turns his attention back to the girl, addressing her as Amelie. Returning to the present moment, Rokaru holds his sheathed katana. He states that while it's not his usual way, he will grant her a special training session just for today. He delivers a stern condition. If he doesn't see any potential in her, she should quietly find another job. With the terms set, he raises his weapon and commands, "Now, come at me." Filled with resolve, Amelie agrees. He watches as the apprentice, Amelie, steals her nerves and announces her attack, charging forward with her shield held high. Her swing is wild and uncontrolled. He sidesteps the clumsy blow with ease, a bead of sweat on his temple as he assesses her form. He realizes she is so terrified that she is swinging frantically, leaving herself completely exposed. He concludes that he cannot possibly train her this way. As her sword clangs ineffectually against his scabbard, he decides that for her own sake, he will have to frighten her into giving up. He grips the hilt of his katana, but his expression suddenly shifts from resolve to bewilderment. He abruptly shouts for her to wait, his sudden command startling the young woman and halting her momentum. The training exercise comes to a standstill in a clearing. He stands before her and asks how, just now, she managed to block his attack. She looks utterly confused, questioning if she even did such a thing. Her lack of awareness makes him wonder if her defensive action was entirely unconscious. His attention then shifts to her shield. He remarks that it looks quite well worn for an apprentice's equipment. Amelie quickly explains that the shield isn't actually hers. She elaborates, sharing that her mother gifted the shield to her father, who loved to use it. Though it is worn out, she confesses that for some reason, she feels safe whenever she has it with her. He listens intently, understanding now that the shield is a precious keepsake. Before the thought can fully form, a cheerful voice interrupts them. Lilia waves as she approaches, asking how the training is going. Amelie's face lights up in recognition, while Rokaru simply observes the newcomer. She watched from a distance, concluding that the training was proceeding well, though she noted Rokaru's apparent lack of interest. He pointed at Amelie, declaring her weapon a hindrance. Amelie, taken aback, could only question his statement. He elaborated on his reasoning, acknowledging her ability to defend unconsciously. However, he explained that counterattacking after defending with such a heavy weapon was inefficient. He advised her to use her shield to her advantage, creating openings to strike back at her opponents. To prove his point, he presented her with a different weapon, a short, sharp dagger. With a confident look, he challenged her to try this new approach. Watching the exchange, Liera's eyes widened, a look of pure amazement on her face at his insightful teaching method. The training resumed with this new strategy. Amelie found herself able to block Rokuru's attacks with ease, marveling that it felt as if the shield were moving on its own. She praised him as an incredible teacher. After a few more exchanges, Rokuru called a halt to the session, satisfied. He told her that while this style required more stamina, it suited her perfectly. He concluded the lesson by telling her that the rest would depend on her daily training, but with this skill, she should be able to earn enough to live on. Amelie's face lit up with hope and gratitude. Overcome with emotion, she thanked him profusely and insisted on doing something to show her appreciation. With a bright smile, she proudly stated her confidence in her cooking skills. Hearing this, Liera suggested they all have dinner at Amelie's house. Amelie agreed and led them through the streets to the royal capital slums. She apologized for the long walk and the humble location, but Liera quickly reassured her it was no problem. Arriving at a small, simple house, Amelie called inside, announcing her return and asking if someone named Kylie was awake. In response, a young boy sitting on a bed inside greeted her warmly, welcoming his older sister home. His eyes lit up as he noticed her companions, asking if she had brought guests. He then excitedly asked if Rokuru and Liera were adventurers. Amelie proudly introduced them as her masters. As the boy greeted them, a woman with long rabbit-like ears expressed her surprise at the title. Rokuru and Liera offered polite introductions, both slightly taken aback by the situation. He listened as the rabbit-eared woman, watching over a steaming pot of stew, mentioned that young Kylie also dreams of becoming an adventurer in the future. The woman encouraged Kylie, telling him he could make his sister proud. Amelie added with a smile that their mother and father had been adventurers as well. He then turned his attention to Amelie, noting her interest in fights. She confirmed enthusiastically, reminiscing about how her parents would tell them stories of the monsters they fought each day. His offer to tell them about the fierce warriors he had fought after dinner was met with immediate excitement from both Amelie and a wide-eyed Kylie. Later that night, under a full moon, Liera listened from outside as the boys' conversation continued, smiling to herself as she overheard them declaring it a men's talk. He stepped outside into the cool night air. Liera noted that Kylie must have fallen asleep, exhausted from all the talking. When she asked what was wrong, he gazed up at the sky, remarking that the moon was different from the one he knew. She confirmed that this was only natural, given that he was in a different world. His eyes narrowed with a grim understanding. The reality, he realized, is the same in every world. Her words painted a picture of this universal reality. Those in power are merely the cunning and the selfish, amassing wealth beyond measure and indulging in endless pleasures. She continued, her expression pained, explaining that while the powerful thrive, the honest and the weak always get the short end of the stick. She understood this was how things were, but the thought of it was unbearable. The admission hung in the quiet night air between them. It made her sick. Seated beside her under the vast, star-filled sky, he quietly agreed. He and Liera are startled by a sudden noise, their heads snapping up in alarm. Rokuru calls out the boy's name, his voice filled with concern. They burst into the room to find a frantic scene. Amelie is kneeling over her brother, Kylie, who is convulsing on the floor. She cries out that he's having a seizure and, in a panic, realizes she is completely out of his medicine. As Amelie panics, Liera springs into action. She tells Rokuru to move aside, declaring that she will take care of the boy and asking for his assistance. She then turns her attention to the distraught Amelie, gripping her shoulders firmly. Liera's voice is urgent as she asks if Amelie knows where they can get more medicine. In response, Amelie stammers that she knows a place. Liera immediately tells her to go quickly, stressing that she is the only one who knows the way. With newfound resolve, Amelie gets up and runs out into the night. She races through the rain-slicked streets, her desperation fueling her speed. Reaching a wooden storefront, she pounds on the door, pleading for someone to open up and shouting that she needs medicine. The door creaks open to reveal an annoyed-looking older man. He demands to know what she wants at this hour and questions if she even has money. Amelie explains that her little brother is having a seizure and desperately needs medicine, holding out a palm with a few meager coins. The man's gaze falls on the coins with contempt. He coldly informs her that this isn't a charity and that her money isn't even enough for cold medicine. He tells her to go home, leaving Amelie speechless with despair. Just as her hope fades, another figure arrives. Kristoff Fontaine, his left arm held in a sling, notices the building with a faint, smug smile, recognizing it as a pharmacy. He steps forward, flanked by garrison knights. With an air of casual entitlement, he announces that he was just in need of some painkillers and declares his intention to buy the pharmacy's entire stock. He dismisses the pharmacist's shock at his request to buy the entire stock. Brushing off Amelie's concern about the high price, he boasts of his wealth. The pharmacist, ecstatic, thanks him for his patronage. His attention then shifts to Amelie. With a condescending smile, he holds up a single vial of the medicine she so desperately needs, asking if this is what she requires. He extends the vial towards her. Overjoyed, she confirms that just one bottle is all she needs. But as she reaches for it, he lets the vial slip from his fingers, shattering it on the ground before her. Amelie collapses to her knees in disbelief and despair. He erupts in laughter, feigning that it was an accident. As Amelie whispers how cruel he is, he looms over her, offering a twisted form of compassion. He proposes a deal. If she accepts his terms, he will give her the medicine. His demeanor turns sharp and menacing. He asks her to confirm if Rokaru and Lilia are currently at her house. The question fills her with sudden, wide-eyed terror. A vicious, predatory grin spreads across his face. The true nature of his deal becomes clear in his mind. He wants her help to